Hi guys, tonight we drift quietly into the winter camps of a long time ago. The sky is a pale grey colour. The air is sharp and tastes like metal. You can feel the frost biting at the tips of your ears. The ground is hard, like stone under your heavy boots. Everything is very, very still. The sun is sinking behind the bare trees, and the light is turning into a soft purple glow. You can hear the dry grass snapping under your feet as you walk. It is a lonely sound, but it is also very peaceful. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you want to let me know where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing those little snapshots of the world. Now dim the lights and let the story begin. You are walking through a forest in the winter of 1863. Your feet feel heavy in your thick leather boots. The leather is stiff from the cold and the laces are frozen into hard knots. Each step you take makes a loud crunching noise on the frozen leaves. It is the only sound in the woods. Besides your own slow breathing, you can see your breath coming out in little white puffs of steam. It looks like tiny clouds floating away in the chilly air. You carry a large pack on your back. It is called a knapsack. Inside, you have everything you own. You have a thin blanket, a small tin cup, and a few pieces of dry bread. The straps of the pack pull on your shoulders, but you do not mind. You are used to the weight. You have walked hundreds of miles with this pack. But today, the walking is almost over. The army has decided to stop. The big fighting is finished for the year because the mud and the snow make it too hard to move the big guns and the wagons. Now, it is time to find a place to live. You are looking for a spot to build a home for the next few months. This is called a winter camp. It is not just a place for a few men. It is a place for thousands and thousands of men. Soon, these quiet woods will be a busy city made of logs and mud. But right now, it is just you and the trees. You look at the ground as you walk. You are looking for a place that is flat. You do not want to sleep on a hill because you would slide down in the middle of the night. You also do not want to sleep in a low spot where the water gathers. If the snow melts, a low spot becomes a cold brown puddle. You want a piece of land that is high and dry. You find a nice area under some tall oak trees. The ground here is covered in brown leaves and old acorns. It looks like a good place to rest. You stop and stand still for a long time. The woods are very quiet when you stop moving. You can hear a bird somewhere far away, making a tiny clicking sound. The wind moves the high branches of the trees, making them groan like old dolls. You feel the cold air moving against your face. It is a deep, biting cold that tries to find its way under your wool coat. You are wearing a very special coat called a greatcoat. It is made of very thick, heavy wool. It is a light blue color, or maybe a dusty grey, depending on which side you are on. The wool is scratchy against your neck, but it is very warm. It is the most important thing you own in the winter. It is long and reaches down past your knees. When you stand still, the coat holds your body heat inside, like a warm hug. One simple fact about this time is that the armies did not fight much in the winter. The roads were just too messy. The thick red mud could swallow a wagon wheel up to the middle. So, the men would build these big camps and stay in one place until the spring sun dried the ground. They became like little villages in the middle of the forest. You look around at your friends. They are also finding their spots. You see 3 other men who share a tent with you. They are your messmates. This means you eat together and sleep together. In the summer, you only have a small piece of canvas. Each man carries one half of the tent. You button them together to make a tiny house that looks like a doghouse. People call them dog tents because they are so small only a dog could be happy inside. But in the winter, a dog tent is not enough. The wind would blow right through the bottom. You need something stronger. You need walls. You look at the tall trees all around you. These trees will be your walls. You see pines with green needles and oaks with grey bark. You reach out and touch the bark of a tree. It is rough and very cold. You can feel the strength of the wood. You know that inside that tree there is a way to stay warm. You just have to do the work to get it out. The light is getting very dim now. The shadows of the trees are long and thin on the ground. You decide that this flat spot, right here between 2 big stones, will be your home. You take off your heavy knapsack and set it down on a dry log. You feel light and strange without the weight on your back. Your shoulders feel like they're floating. You take a small tool out of your belt. It is a hatchet. The metal head is cold, and the wooden handle is smooth from use. You tap the blade with your thumb. It is sharp. You will need it tomorrow. Tonight, you will just sleep under the stars, wrapped in your greatcoat and your thin blanket. You will lie on the hard ground and dream of a house with wooden walls and a real fire. You sit down on your pack for a moment of quiet. You look up through the bare branches at the first few stars. They look like tiny holes poked in a dark velvet cloth. The air is so clear and cold that the stars seem to twinkle more than usual. Everything feels very big, and you feel very small. But you are not afraid. You are with your friends, and you have a plan. You are with your friends, and you have a plan. You are the watchman of this little piece of the woods. You listen to the sounds of the other men nearby. You can hear the low hum of their voices. You can hear the clink of a metal cup against a spoon. Someone is trying to start a small fire nearby, and you can smell the first bit of wood smoke. It is a sweet, sharp smell. It smells like safety. It smells like home, even if home is just a patch of dirt in a dark forest. You wrap your arms around your chest and pull your coat tight. You can feel the wall rubbing against your chin. You think about the work that starts tomorrow. You will have to cut the trees. You will have to lift the heavy logs. You will have to dig in the frozen earth. It will be very hard work, but it will keep you alive. When the big snows come, you will be inside. You will be behind thick walls of wood. For now, you just breathe. You watch the white mist of your breath disappear into the dark. You feel the cold ground through your trousers, but the heavy wool of your coat keeps your top half warm. You lean back against a tree. The bark is hard against your spine, but it is steady. It does not move. It is a good tree. It will be a good camp. The silence of the winter woods is very deep. It is a heavy kind of quiet. It feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the snow. You closing your eyes for just a second. You can feel the tiredness in your legs. You can feel the way your muscles want to let go. You have walked 20 miles today. Your body is ready for sleep. You hear the soft crunch of a leaf nearby. It is just a friend moving to find a better spot to lie down. You hear a soft good night whispered in the dark. You say it back, your voice sounding a bit raspy in the cold air. The word home goes through your mind. This spot in the woods doesn't look like a home yet. It is just dirt and trees and cold wind. But in a few days, it will be different. It will have a door. It will have a roof. It will have a fire. You think about the tiny details of your gear. You reach into your pocket and find a small piece of hardtack. Hardtack is a very hard cracker made of flour and water. It is as hard as a brick. If you tried to bite it now, you might break a tooth. You usually have to soak it in coffee to make it soft enough to eat. You hold the cold square cracker in your hand. It feels like a smooth stone. It is not much, but it is food. It is what keeps you going. You put the cracker back in your pocket. You will save it for the morning. In the morning, you will need the energy to swing the axe. You will need the strength to build your hut. You look at the spot where your hut will be. You imagine the 4 walls rising up from the ground. You imagine the smoke coming out of a chimney. You can almost feel the warmth of the fire on your hands. The wind picks up a little bit. It whistles through the dead leaves still hanging on the bushes. It makes a dry, rattling sound. It reminds you that the winter is just beginning. The real cold has not even arrived yet. The ice is coming. The deep snow is coming. But you are ready. You have your coat, you have your tools, and you have your friends. You lie down on the ground, using your knapsack as a pillow. The ground is very hard, but you find a spot between the roots of the tree that fits your shape. You pull your blanket over your greatcoat. You tuck the edges under your legs to keep the wind out. You are like a little cocoon on the forest floor. You look at the dark shapes of the trees one last time. They are like giant guards standing over you. You feel safe here. The forest is big and dark, but it is also quiet and calm. You let your eyes close. You listen to the sound of your own heart beating, slow and steady. You are warm enough for now. You are safe enough for now. Tomorrow the building begins. Tomorrow you will start to turn this cold woods into a place where a man can sleep warm. The stars keep watching over the camp. Thousands of men are doing exactly what you are doing. They are all curled up under the trees, dreaming of warm beds and hot food. The whole army is resting. The horses are standing still in their lines. The big wagons are parked in the shadows. Everything is waiting for the morning sun. You feel a soft peace settle over you. The cold is there, but it is outside of your blanket. Inside, there is just the warmth of your own body. You breathe in the cold, clean air. It feels fresh in your lungs. You breathe out. and the sleep starts to come. It pulls at you like a gentle tide. You let it take you. You drift away from the cold woods and into the quiet dark of sleep. The watchman of the woods is resting. The first night in the winter camp has begun. The morning sun is a pale, weak yellow as it climbs over the edge of the world. It does not feel warm yet, but the light is helpful. You wake up with a thin layer of white frost on your blanket. When you move, the frost cracks and falls away like tiny pieces of glass. Your joints feel stiff and slow, like the cold grease in a wagon wheel. You stand up and stretch your arms high above your head. You can hear the pop of your back. You take a deep breath of the morning air. It is so cold it makes your nose tingle, but it wakes you up better than a splash of water. Today is the day the real work begins. You cannot live on the frozen ground forever. You need a house. You look at your friends, your messmates, as they crawl out from their blankets. Everyone looks a bit grey and tired, but there is a feeling of excitement in the air. Today you are not marching. Today you are building. You reach for your tool. It is a felling axe. The axe is a heavy thing. The head is made of dark iron and has a sharp edge made of steel. The handle is made of smooth hickory wood. It has a gentle curve that fits perfectly into your palms. You have spent a long time keeping this tool in good shape. You reach into your pocket and pull out a small flat stone. This is a whetstone. It is a microhistory detail that every soldier knows well. It is a simple grey stone used to keep the metal sharp. You sit on a stump and rub the stone against the edge of the axe blade. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound is steady and calm. You want the blade to be as sharp as a razor so that it bites deep into the wood instead of bouncing off. One simple fact about these winter camps is that an army was like a giant machine that ate forests. When thousands of men arrived in a place like this, they would cut down every single tree for miles. In just a few days, a thick forest would turn into an open field full of stumps. The wood was needed for everything, for walls, for roofs, for fires, and for roads. It changed the look of the land forever. You stand up and walk toward a tall pine tree. It is straight and strong. You look up to where the green needles touch the cold blue sky. You say a small thank you to the tree in your head. It is going to keep you warm this winter. You plant your feet wide apart on the crunchy ground. You feel the weight of your heavy wool greatcoat. It is a bit hard to move your shoulders in the thick cloth, but you do not want to take it off yet. The air is still too sharp. You take your first swing. You lift the axe over your right shoulder, pause for a tiny second, and then let it fall. Thwack. The blade sinks deep into the bark. A small chip of white wood flies out and lands on the brown leaves. You pull the axe back and swing again. Thwack. The sound echoes through the woods. You hear other men doing the same thing. All around you the forest is filled with the sound of chopping. It sounds like a giant clock ticking. Thwack, thwack, thwack. You work with a steady rhythm. You do not want to go too fast and tire yourself out. You want to be like a machine, slow and sure. You cut a deep notch into one side of the tree. This is the mouth of the cut. It tells the tree which way to fall. You can smell the scent of the pine now. It is a very strong, clean smell. It smells like the mountains and the cold wind. The sap is sticky and clear, like thick honey. It gets on your gloves and on your axe handle, but you do not mind. It is part of the job. As you work, your body begins to change. The blood starts to move faster in your veins. You feel a glow of warmth starting in the center of your chest and spreading to your fingers and toes. The cold air does not feel so biting anymore. You can see the steam rising off your neck. You decide it is time to take off your heavy coat. You lay it carefully over a dry bush where it will stay clean. Now, you are just in your wool shirt and trousers. The air feels cool and refreshing against your skin. You move to the other side of the tree to make the back cut. You swing the axe with a bit more force now. Your muscles feel loose and strong. You can feel the vibration of the hit travel up the wooden handle and into your arms. It is a solid, honest feeling. You are doing something real. You are making something. Every chip of wood that flies off is a step closer to having a warm place to sleep. You stop for a moment to catch your breath. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. You lean your forehead against the cool bark of the tree. The forest has gone quiet for a second. The wind has died down. You can hear your own heart beating in your ears, thump, thump, thump. You look at your hands. They are red from the cold and the work, and you can see a small blister starting to form on your thumb. It is a small price to pay for a home, You look at the sky and see a hawk circling high above, looking for a mouse in the grass. The world is very big, and you are just a man with an axe, but you feel like you belong here. You hear a crack. It is a tiny sound, like a dry twig snapping. You look up. The top of the pine tree is moving very slowly. It is leaning. You step back and shout a warning to your friends. Timber! Your voice sounds loud in the quiet air. The tree begins to fall. It moves slowly at first, then faster. You hear the branches rushing through the air with a loud whoosh sound. Then the tree hits the ground with a massive thud. The earth beneath your boots shakes. A cloud of snow and dried leaves rises up into the air. Then everything is still again. The tall guard of the forest is now a long log on the ground. You walk over to the fallen tree. It looks even bigger now that it is down. You begin to trim the branches off. You use your axe to limb the tree. You start at the bottom and work your way to the top. Each branch comes off with a quick, sharp strike. These branches are not rubbish. You will save them. The thick ones can be used for the roof, and the small ones with the green needles will make a soft, sweet-smelling bed. Nothing is wasted in the winter camp. Your messmate, a tall man with a kind face, comes over to help you. He has his own axe. You do not talk much because you need your breath for the work, but you smile at each other. It is good to have help. To build a hut, you will need about 20 or 30 logs like this one. It is a lot of chopping. It is a lot of lifting. But when you look at the fallen tree, you don't see a chore. You see a wall. You see protection from the snow that is coming. You move to the next tree. This one is an oak. The wood is much harder than the pine. When your axe hits the oak, it makes a higher sound, a sharp ping instead of a dull thud. The oak is heavy and strong. It will make a very good foundation for your house. You settle back into your rhythm. Swing, breathe, swing, breathe. The white wood chips fly. The morning moves along. You look around and see the landscape changing. The city is starting to take shape. Men are marking out squares on the ground with sticks. These squares are where the huts will sit. You see some men already starting to drag their first logs toward their spots. They use long ropes or just their own strong arms. They look like ants moving bits of straw. It is amazing what people can do when they work together. By the time the sun is straight overhead, your arms feel heavy. Your shoulders are tight. You sit down on the trunk of the tree you just cut. You reach into your haversack and pull out a piece of dry meat. It is cold and salty, but it tastes wonderful because you are so hungry. You chew it slowly, letting the salt wake up your tongue. You take a drink of water from your tin canteen. The water is so cold it makes your teeth ache, but it feels good in your dry throat. You look at the clearing you have made. There are 3 logs laying there, ready to be moved. They are clean and straight. You feel a sense of pride. You did this. You took what the forest gave you, and you began to turn it into a shelter. You think about the nights ahead. You think about the fire that will eventually burn in the hearth. You can almost see the golden light of the flames reflecting off these very logs. The work of the morning is done, but the work of the day is not. There are more trees to cut. There are more branches to clear. You stand up and shake out your arms. You feel a bit stiff, but as soon as you pick up the axe, the strength comes back. The hickory handle feels warm now, as if it has soaked up the heat from your hands. You look at your messmate. He is already back at work on a thick cedar tree. The smell of the cedar is spicy and sharp. You join him. The 2 of you work together. Your axes falling at different times, tock-tick, tock-tick. It is a good sound. It is the sound of survival. It is the sound of a camp being born. The forest is different now. It is louder, brighter, and busier. The birds have flown away to deeper woods. But the men are here. You are the watchman of this work. You are the one who ensures the walls will be thick and the logs will be straight. You take another swing at the oak. The blade bites deep. You are not just a soldier today. You are a builder. You are a maker of homes. You feel a deep, quiet peace in the hard labor. The sun stays high and the axes keep singing. You are well on your way to a warm winter. The sun is moving across the pale sky and the shadows of the stumps are growing longer on the cold ground. Now that the trees are down and the branches are cleared, the real heavy lifting begins. A log that looks small when it is standing up feels very different when you have to move it across the earth. These logs are the bones of your new home. They are thick, round, and heavy with the sap of the forest. You look at the pile of wood you have made. It is time to turn these piles into walls. You and your 3 friends stand around the first big log. It is a pine log, about 10 feet long. To move it, you do not just use your hands, you use a very simple tool called a handspike. A handspike is just a very strong, thick wooden pole with a pointed end. It is a microhistory detail that every woodsman knows. You slide the point of the pole under the log and push down on the other end. This uses the power of a lever to lift the heavy wood just enough so your friends can get their hands underneath it. It is a clever way to make a heavy job a little bit easier. One simple fact about these huts is that they were usually very small. Most of them were only about 7 feet wide and 10 feet long. That is not much bigger than a modern garden shed. In this tiny space, 4 grown men would live, sleep, and eat for months. It sounds very crowded, and it was. But in the winter, being close together was a good thing. 4 bodies produce a lot of heat. In a small room, that heat stays trapped, keeping everyone warm like a huddle of puppies in a nest. You reach down and grab one end of the log. The bark is rough and cold. It scrapes against the palms of your hands. You can feel the dampness of the earth on the wood. On 3, your friend says. His voice is low and steady. 1, 2, 3, lift. You all pull upward at the same time. Your legs shake a little as the weight hits your muscles. You can feel the strain in your lower back and your shoulders. But the log rises. You begin to walk slowly toward the square you marked out on the ground. Each step is a struggle. Your boots sink into the soft, churned-up dirt. You have to be careful not to trip on an old root or a stray branch. If one man falls, the log could crush someone's foot. You move like a giant, slow-motion insect with many legs. You are all breathing hard now. The steam from your breath mixes together, creating a thick white fog around your heads. Finally, you reach the spot. Down, someone grunts. You let the log roll off your fingers. It hits the ground with a deep, hollow thump. You stand up and wipe the sweat from your forehead with the back of your glove. Even though the air is freezing, you are starting to feel very hot from the work. You repeat this 3 more times until you have 4 logs laying in a rectangle on the ground. This is your foundation. It is the most important part of the building. If the foundation is not straight, the whole house will be crooked. You use your boots to nudge the logs until the corners look square. Now comes the part that requires a bit of skill. You cannot just stack round logs on top of each other. They would roll off like a pile of pencils. You have to lock them together at the corners. You pick up your hatchet again. You are going to make a saddle notch. This means you cut a rounded U shape into the ends of the logs. It looks a bit like a saddle that sits on a horse. When the next log is placed on top, its round belly fits perfectly into that notch. It locks the wood together so the walls cannot move. You nail in the dirt at one corner. You swing your hatchet with short, controlled strokes. Chip, chip, chip. Small pieces of pale wood fly into the air. You are making a smooth, curved hollow. You stop every few minutes to check the shape with your hand. You want it to be just right. While you work, your friends are doing the same at the other corners. The sound of the 4 hatchets working at once is like a busy drum circle. It is a productive, happy sound. Once the notches are ready, you lift the next layer of logs. These go on top of the first ones, but in the other direction. You lift them up and guide them into the notches. There is a very satisfying sound when a log settles into its place. It is a solid, muffled clunk. When the wood fits perfectly, the wall feels as strong as a mountain. You push on it with your shoulder, and it does not budge. You take a moment of atmospheric silence now. You stand in the center of your small rectangle of logs. The walls are only 2 logs high right now, so they only come up to your shins, but you can already feel the space becoming yours. You look around at the other huts being built nearby. All across the clearing, walls are rising. You hear the shouts of men, the ring of steel on wood, and the distant neighing of a horse. But right here, inside your 4 logs, it feels quiet. You look at the grain of the wood. You see the rings of the tree, telling the story of many years of growth. You are using that history to build your own future. For a moment you just stand there, feeling the cold wind on your face and the solid wood beneath your feet. You shake off the stillness and get back to work. You need to get the walls higher before the sun goes down. The 3rd layer of logs is hardest to place because you have to lift them higher. You have to bring them up to your knees, then your waist. Your arms are starting to feel like lead. Your fingers are sore from gripping the rough bark. But you don't stop. You look at your messmates. One of them is whistling a low, slow tune. Another is telling a story about a barn he built back home in the countryside. The talk helps the time pass. It makes the logs feel just a little bit lighter. By the time you reach the fifth layer, the walls are up to your chest. To get these logs in place, you and your friends have to work even closer together. You stand on the inside of the hut, and two friends stand on the outside. You lift the log up together, sliding it up the sides of the walls. Your face is inches away from the wood. You can smell the earth, the sap, and the old rain that soaked into the bark weeks ago. You can see tiny bits of green moss clinging to the logs. Lifting a log to chest height is a real test of strength. Your muscles burn. You can feel the blood thumping in your neck. You grit your teeth and push. Almost there, someone says. With a final heave, the log rolls into its notches. You all lean against the wall for a second, catching your breath. Your chests are heaving. Your wool shirts are damp with sweat, even in the cold. You look at each other and grin. The walls are high now. You are no longer standing in a field. You are standing in a room. You look at the gaps between the logs. Because the logs are round, there are long, thin spaces between them where they touch. Right now, the wind blows right through those gaps. It whistles as it passes, making a high, lonely sound. Later, you will fill those gaps with mud to make the house warm. But for now, the gaps are like little windows. You can see the orange light of the setting sun peeking through the horizontal lines of the walls. One of your friends points to the sky. The first few clouds of the evening are rolling in. They are heavy and dark, the color of a bruised plum. It looks like snow might be coming sooner than you thought. This gives you a new burst of energy. You don't want to be caught with a half-finished house when the flakes start to fall. You reach for the next log. As you work, you notice the microhistory of the wood itself. Some logs are smooth and easy to notch. Others have hard knots that make your hatchet bounce. These knots are where branches used to be. They are like hard stones hidden inside the wood. You have to be careful when you hit them so you don't nick your blade. You learn the personality of each piece of timber. This one is stubborn. That one is cooperative. The walls are now 6 logs high. They are tall enough that you can no longer see over them when you are sitting down. You have left a gap in one of the walls. This gap will be your door. It looks strange right now, just a hole in the logs, but it is the way in and out of your world. You have also left a space for the chimney, which you will build later. The light is fading fast now. The forest is turning into a world of deep blues and blacks. The temperature is dropping quickly. You can feel the damp sweat on your skin starting to turn cold. You reach for your greatcoat and pull it back on. The thick wool feels wonderful. It protects you from the sudden chill. You look at your work one last time before it gets too dark to see. The walls are sturdy. They are straight. They are the result of hours of back-breaking labor. You run your hand along the top log. It is cold and damp, but it feels like safety. You and your friends have built something with your own hands. You have taken the tall, swaying trees and turned them into a solid box that the wind cannot move. You feel a deep sense of tiredness, but it is a good kind of tired. It is the tiredness that comes from doing something important. Tonight, you will still sleep on the ground, but you will sleep inside your walls. The wind will hit the logs instead of hitting you. You will be tucked away in your little wooden square, protected from the vast, dark woods outside. You look at your friends, and you see the same look of tired pride on their faces. You have built the bones of your home. Tomorrow, you will give it a skin of mud and a roof of cloth. But for now, the walls are enough. The watchman of the hut is ready for a rest. The night was cold, but the morning brings a new kind of energy. You wake up inside your new wooden square. The walls are high, but they are not solid yet. As you lie there in the early light, you see the world through the gaps between the logs. You see thin stripes of the forest and the grey morning sky. You also feel the wind. It is a sneaky wind. It finds every little space between the logs and blows right through. It carries the smell of damp leaves and the sting of frost. It reminds you that your work is not finished. A house of logs is only a cage for the wind until you seal it up. Today, you are going to make your home tight. This means you are going to fill those long, thin gaps with something that the wind cannot get through. You and your friends get up and shake the sleep from your arms. You look at the walls. The spaces between the logs are sometimes an inch wide, sometimes 3. They look like long, hungry mouths waiting to be fed. To fill them, you need the earth itself. You need mud. You pick up a heavy metal bucket. It is a simple thing, dented and stained from many fires, but it is your most important tool right now. You walk toward a small creek that runs near the edge of the camp. The ground here is soft and damp. You look for a spot where the soil looks different. You are looking for clay. Clay is a special kind of earth that is thick and sticky, like the dough your mother used to make bread. One simple fact about these winter huts is that the soldiers call this job chinking and daubing. Chinking is when you pull small pieces of wood or stones into the gaps. Daubing is when you cover those pieces with a thick layer of wet mud or clay. It is a very old way of building houses, and it works very well. It turns a pile of logs into a solid, warm room. You find a spot by the water where the earth is a deep slate grey colour. You kneel down on the cold ground. You can feel the dampness soaking into the knees of your trousers. You reach out and touch the earth. It is very cold, almost like ice. You use a small shovel to dig into the bank. The clay is heavy. It sticks to the metal of the shovel with a wet sucking sound. You fill your bucket halfway. If you fill it to the top, it will be too heavy to carry back to the hut. You stand by the creek for a moment of atmospheric silence. The water is moving slowly under a thin skin of ice at the edges. You can hear a soft tink 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 as the moving water bumps against the frozen bits. The woods are very still. You are alone for a minute, away from the noise of the building. You look at the grey clay in your bucket. It looks humble and plain, but it is the secret to staying alive this winter. You take a deep breath of the cold, wet air and then pick up your load. The walk back to the hut is slow. The bucket pulls on your arm, making your shoulder lean to one side. When you get back, your friends have already started the first part of the job. They are gathering chinks. These are small, flat chips of wood left over from when you were chopping the logs. They are also picking up small, round stones from the ground. They are stuffing these bits into the gaps between the logs. It looks like they are putting a puzzle together. They push the wood and stones in tight so they don't fall out. This gives the mud something to stick to. Now it is time to mix the daubing. You pour a little bit of water from your canteen into the bucket of dry clay. You find a sturdy stick and begin to stir. It is hard work. The clay is stubborn. It wants to stay in hard lumps. You push and turn the stick, breaking the lumps apart. You add a little bit of dried grass or old straw that you found near the horse wagons. This is a clever trick. The grass acts like tiny bits of rope inside the mud. It holds everything together so that when the mud dries and shrinks, it does not crack and fall out. As you stir, the mud starts to turn into a thick, smooth paste. It has a very specific smell. It smells like deep earth, like the bottom of a well. And like old rain, it is not a bad smell. It is the smell of the world itself. You keep stirring until the mud is the right thickness. It should be like thick porridge. If it is too thin, it will run down the logs like grey tears. If it is too thick, you won't be able to spread it. You reach into the bucket with your bare hands. The mud is shockingly cold. It feels like a wet weight on your skin. You take a big glob of it and press it against the wall. You use your fingers to push it deep into the gaps, covering the wood chips and the stones. You can feel the rough bark of the logs against your knuckles. You smooth the mud out with the palm of your hand. For the fine work, you use a special tool. This is your microhistory detail. It is a wooden shingle. A shingle is just a flat, thin piece of wood, usually used for roofs, but here you use it like a trowel. You hold the flat side of the shingle against the wet mud and slide it along the gap. It makes the mud look smooth and neat. It fills the spaces so perfectly that no air can get through. You work from the bottom of the wall to the top. You find a rhythm. Reach into the bucket, grab a handful of cold mud, press it in, and smooth it over. Your hands are soon covered in grey. The mud gets under your fingernails and dries in the small lines of your skin. It feels heavy on your arms. Your fingers start to feel numb from the cold, but you do not stop. You look at the wall and see the change. The windows of light between the logs are disappearing. One by one, the stripes of the forest are being blotted out by the grey clay. The wall starts to look solid. It looks strong. When the wind hits the outside of the hut now, it does not whistle through. It hits the mud and stops. You can almost feel the room becoming quieter. The sounds of the camp, the shouting, the hammering, the horses become muffled and soft, as if they are far away. You are creating a private world inside these four walls. You look at your friends. They are also covered in mud. One of them has a big splash of grey on his cheek. You all look a bit like the earth itself. You don't talk much because you are focusing on the work. You want the seal to be perfect. You know that in a month, When the temperature drops far below zero, you will be very glad you spend the time to do this right. As the sun climbs higher, the first part of the mud begins to dry. It changes color from a dark, wet gray to a light, dusty silver. It feels hard and crusty when you touch it. You see a few small cracks starting to form. You take a little more wet mud and rub it over the cracks, healing the wall. It is a slow, patient process. You are like a bird building a nest, or a beaver building a dam. You are using what the land gives you to make a safe place. Your back begins to ache from leaning over the bucket. You stand up and walk around the inside of the hut. You put your hand near one of the gaps you haven't filled yet. You can feel a jet of cold air hitting your palm. It feels like a needle of ice. Then you move your hand to a part of the wall that is already finished. You feel nothing but the stillness of the logs. The difference is amazing. It makes you want to work even harder. You go back to the creek 3 more times to fill your bucket. Each trip feels a little longer as your muscles get tired. You see other men from other companies doing the same thing. The creek bank is getting busy. Men are laughing and complaining about the cold mud, but everyone is working. It is a shared struggle. Thousands of men are all trying to hide from the winter at the same time. By the afternoon, you are working on the last wall. This is the wall with the door. You are extra careful here. You want the edges of the door to be very smooth, so that when you hang a blanket or a piece of wood over it, it fits tight. You use your wooden shingle to make a very straight, clean edge of mud. Your hands are very cold now. The wetness of the mud has pulled all the heat out of your bones. You rub your hands together, but the dried clay makes a scratching sound. You don't mind the mess. The mess is a sign of a good job. You look at your coat, which you left in a clean spot. You are looking forward to putting it back on. You are looking forward to the feeling of dry wool against your skin. Finally, the last gap is filled. You stand back and look at your work. The inside of the hut looks very different now. It is darker, but it feels much warmer. The walls are no longer a collection of separate logs. They are a solid barrier. The mud is still wet and shiny in some places, and dull and dry in others. It creates a pattern of greys and browns that is very pretty in its own way. It looks like a real home. You take the leftover mud and walk outside. You do the same thing to the outside of the walls. You want to double the protection. You fill the gaps from the outside too, so that there is a thick layer of clay between the inner wood and the outer wood. This is the best way to keep the heat in. The sun is starting to go down again. The light is turning a soft golden orange. It hits the new mud walls and makes them glow for a moment. You feel a great sense of relief. The wind can blow all it wants tonight. It won't find a way into your house. You have used the bones of the trees and the skin of the earth to build your shelter. You go back to the creek one last time, but not for clay. You go to wash your hands. You dip them into the freezing water. It is so cold, it feels like it is burning. But the mud washes away. Your skin is red and raw, but it is clean. You dry your hands on a piece of rough cloth. You feel the air hitting your clean skin, and it feels different now. You are ready to go back to your solid, silent hut. You walk back through the camp. Everywhere you look, the grey walls are rising. The night shift of the builders is coming to an end for the day. You reach your hut and step inside. It smells like wet earth and fresh wood. It is a good smell. You sit down on the dirt floor and lean your back against the new, solid wall. It feels steady. It feels like it will last. You have won your first battle against the winter. You have stopped the wind. The sun is hanging a little lower now, and the light is turning the color of old honey. You are standing inside the rectangle of logs, and even though the mud is mostly mixed, the real task of sealing yourself away from the winter is just beginning. This is the part of the job that requires patience. It is not like chopping a tree or lifting a log, which uses all of your strength at once. This is slow, quiet, and very steady work. You are about to turn these open walls into a solid barrier. You look at the long, dark lines between the pine logs. These are the gaps where the winter wants to come in. You start with the chinking. You and your friends have gathered a large pile of small things. There are flat chips of wood that flew off your axe this morning. There are smooth, round stones from the creek bed. There are even some thick pieces of bark that have fallen off the logs. These are the bones of your wall skin. You take a handful of these small wood chips. They're dry and rough. You find a gap between the second and third log. It is a wide gap, nearly 3 inches across. You begin to wedge the wood chips into the space. You have to be careful how you place them. You don't just throw them in. You set them at an angle. like little teeth. You push them in until they are snug and do not wiggle. Sometimes a chip is too big, so you use your heavy boot to snap it in half. The sound of the wood snapping is sharp and clean in the quiet air. Crack. You push the smaller piece into the hole. Then you take a round stone and jam it in next to the wood. You are building a skeleton inside the gap. This gives the mud something to hold onto. Without these sticks and stones, the mud would just fall through to the other side or slump down in a wet pile. One simple fact about this process is that the soldiers often had to get very creative with what they used for chinking. If they could not find enough stones or wood, they would use whatever was nearby. Some men would use old corn cobs from the horse feed. Others would even use old torn-up newspapers or pages from books they had already read. They would roll the paper into tight tubes and shove them into the cracks. It shows how much they wanted to stay warm. Anything that could stop a breeze was worth its weight in gold. You move slowly along the wall. Your knees are bent and your back is slightly hunched. You can feel the cold of the logs through your trousers as you lean against them. The bark is bumpy and has little bits of dried moss on it. You pick up a special tool you made this morning. This is your microhistory detail, a daubing stick. It is just a flat piece of heartwood, about the size of a large spoon, but you have carved one end to be thin and flat. It is your homemade trowel. You use this stick to push the chinking deeper into the narrow spots where your fingers cannot reach. Now you reach into the bucket of wet grey clay. The mud has settled a little, so you stir it again with your hand. It is thick and heavy. It feels like very cold, wet velvet against your skin. You take a large glob of it, about the size of an apple. You press it firmly against the sticks and stones you just wedged into the wall. You use the heel of your hand to mash it in. You can hear a wet, squelching sound as the mud fills the tiny spaces between the chinks. Sklorp. It is a messy job, but it is a good mess. As you work, you notice the smell of the wet earth is getting stronger. It is a deep, rich smell. It reminds you of a garden after a heavy rain in the autumn. It is the smell of the ground waking up, even though the world is actually going to sleep for the winter. You find it very calming. You don't think about the war, or the long marches, or the hunger. You only think about this 1 inch of the wall. You think about making it smooth. You think about making it thick. You take your daubing stick and begin to strike the joint. This means you run the flat edge of the stick along the mud to make it level with the logs. You move the stick from left to right, slowly and carefully. The mud smooths out beautifully. It fills the gap from the top log to the bottom log, creating a solid grey stripe. You look at it and feel a sense of peace. That one stripe is a promise that the wind will not touch you there. You stop for a moment of atmospheric silence. You stand up straight and let your arms hang by your sides. Your fingers are dripping with grey mud and your shoulders are tired. You close your eyes. The camp is still busy around you, but the sound is changing. As more and more men finish their walls, the noise of the world is being cut off. You can hear a faint whistle of wind high up in the oak trees. But down here, inside your half-finished house, the air is starting to hold still. You can hear the sound of your own breath, slow and steady. The world feels like it is being wrapped in a thick, heavy blanket of silence. It is a very safe feeling. You open your eyes and go back to the next gap. You are working on the lower part of the wall now, near the ground. This is where the draughts come from. A draught is a sneaky current of cold air that crawls across the floor and freezes your toes while you sleep. You make sure to put extra mud in these bottom cracks. You even pile some dirt against the outside of the lowest block. This is called banking. It helps to keep the floor from getting too cold. Your hands are starting to feel very strange. The clay is drying on your skin, turning from a wet grey to a chalky, pale white. It feels tight, like you are wearing a thin pair of gloves that are a size too small. When you move your fingers, the dried mud cracks and flakes off, falling into the dirt like grey snow. You don't mind. You just reach back into the bucket for more wet clay. The wetness feels shocking at first, but then your hands go a bit numb and you don't feel the cold as much. You and your messmates are working on different walls, but you are all part of the same rhythm. Every now and then you hear the thud of a stone being hammered into a gap or the slap of mud hitting the wood. No one speaks. There is no need for words. The work is the conversation. You are all building a life together in this tiny square. You look over at your friend. He has a smudge of mud on his forehead and his wool shirt is covered in grey spots. He looks like a part of the building itself. You smile at him and he nods back, By the time you reach the middle of the afternoon, the inside of the hut looks completely different. The walls are no longer just a stack of logs. They are a pattern of brown and grey. The horizontal stripes of mud look neat and clean. The room is much darker now because the light cannot shine through the cracks anymore. This makes the hut feel smaller, but it also makes it feel much more like a real home. It is a private place. It is a place where the world can't see you. You decide to go around the outside and do the finish coat. You step out of the door gap and look at your work from the outside. The logs look strong and the mud looks solid. You take your bucket and go along the exterior walls. You add a little more mud here and there, smoothing out any lumps. You want the outside to be just as tight as the inside. You imagine the winter storms hitting these walls. You imagine the snow piling up against the logs. You want the snow to find no way in. You want it to slide right off the smooth, dried clay. The sun is now a deep red ball hanging just above the horizon. The temperature is falling fast. You can feel the air getting heavier and sharper. But inside your hut, things are different. You step back inside and notice something wonderful. The air inside the hut is a tiny bit warmer than the air outside. It is not hot, yet you don't have a fire, but it is still. When the air doesn't move, your own body heat stays near you. You take the very last bit of mud from the bottom of your bucket. You find one tiny hole near the corner where a bit of light is still peeking through. You plug it with a small stone and cover it with the last of the clay. You smooth it over with your thumb, feeling the grit of the sand in the mud. There. The walls are done. They are sealed. They are tight. You look at your hands. They are completely covered in grey crust. You rub them together, and the dried mud makes a dry, raspy sound. You feel a great sense of accomplishment. You have built a fortress against the cold. It is a humble fortress made of sticks and dirt, but it is yours. You and your friends had taken the raw materials of the forest and the earth and turned them into a shelter. You set your empty bucket down in the corner. You look at the dark interior of your hut. It is quiet. It is solid. The wind is beginning to pick up outside and you can hear it mourning in the trees, but it cannot get to you. You are the watchman of this small space. You have done the work. You have closed the gaps. You are ready for the next step. You lean against the logs and feel the strength of the wall behind you. It does not move. It does not let the cold in. You are safe. The walls are finished. You stand in the center of your new home, and for the first time you are surrounded by the scent of pine and wet earth. The four walls rise up around you, reaching as high as your shoulders. It is a solid, square world. But when you look up, you still see the wide open sky. You see the grey clouds moving quickly, and you see the tops of the bare trees swaying in the wind. It feels a bit like being at the bottom of a wooden well. The walls keep the wind from hitting your body, but they cannot stop the snow from falling on your head. You need a lid for your box. You need a roof. You walk over to your knapsack, which is sitting on a stump nearby. You reach inside and pull out a piece of heavy off-white cloth. This is your shelter half. It is a simple rectangle of thick cotton duck, which is a type of very strong canvas. Every soldier carries one. It has a row of buttons along one edge and a row of holes along the other. In the summer, you would button your half to a friend's half to make a tiny tent. But now, in the winter camp, these pieces of cloth have a new job. They're going to be your ceiling. One simple historical fact about these huts is that the army did not give the men wood for roofs. The men had to be clever. Some used long pieces of bark, but most used their own summer tents. Since 4 of you live in this hut, you have 4 pieces of canvas. When you button them all together, you have one very large sheet of cloth. It is just enough to cover the top of your cabin and keep the weather out. It is a simple way to use what you already have to stay safe. You and your messmates spread the 4 pieces of canvas out on the ground. The cloth is dirty and stained with the mud of a dozen different fields. It smells like old campfire smoke and dried rain. You kneel down and begin the slow work of buttoning them together. Your fingers are still a bit stiff from the cold, and the canvas is heavy. This is your microhistory detail, the tent buttons. They are small, round buttons made of white bone or sometimes dim metal. You push the bone buttons through the thick, hand-sewn holes. It is a tight fit. You want the seal to be very strong so the wind doesn't rip the pieces apart in the middle of a storm. Once the canvas is one big sheet, you look at the top of your walls. You cannot just lay the cloth flat across the logs. If you did that, the rain and melted snow would sit in the middle like a heavy puddle. Eventually, the water would soak through or the weight would break the cloth. You need a peak. You need the roof to look like an upside-down V, so the water can slide right off the sides. You find 2 strong young trees you cut down earlier. You trim them until they are long, straight poles. You call these your ridge poles. You place 1 pole across the very top of the hut, right in the middle. To hold it up, you have built 2 wooden Y shapes into the tops of the end walls. The ridge pole sits in the crotch of the Y, stretching from the front of the house to the back. It looks like a high spine for your home. You and your friends grab the heavy canvas sheet. You lift it up, 1 man at each corner. You walk to the walls and heave the cloth over the ridge pole. It is a bit like spreading a tablecloth over a very large table. The canvas slides over the wood with a soft shh sound. Now the cloth hangs down on both sides of the center pole, draped over the log walls. You step inside the hut to see how it looks. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. You stand in the middle of the dirt floor. Above you, the sky is gone. In its place is a ceiling of pale glowing cloth. The light inside the hut is different now. It is soft and creamy. Even though the clouds outside are dark and grey, the canvas catches the light and spreads it around the room. It feels very private. You can no longer hear the shouts of the men in the next company. You can only hear the soft rhythmic thwap-whap of the wind hitting the canvas. It is a very gentle sound, like a giant heart beating. For a moment, you just stand there, looking at the way the light picks out the weave of the cotton. You feel like you are inside a secret cocoon. But the roof is not finished yet. You need to make the cloth tight. If the canvas is loose, it will flap in the wind and make a noise like a drum all night. You step back outside. You find some long, thin branches. You lay these branches over the top of the canvas, resting them against the ridge pole and the tops of the walls. These act like weights. They press the cloth down so it doesn't fly away. Then you take some bits of rope. You do not have much real rope, so you use what you can find. You use strips of old leather or even vines from the woods. You tie the corners of the canvas to the heavy bottom lobs of the hut. You pull the strings as tight as you can. You want the roof to be as firm as the skin on a drum. When you tap it with your hand, it makes a solid thump. This is good. It means when the snow falls, it will slide right off and hit the ground outside the walls. As you work, you notice the smell of the canvas changing. As it stretches, it releases the scent of the dust from the long summer marches. You remember the hot sun and the long roads, and it makes the cold winter air feel a bit more bearable. You are glad to be standing still. You are glad to have a roof over your head. The canvas is not perfect. There are a few tiny holes where sparks from old fires have burned the cloth. There is a small tear near one of the buttons that you had to fix with a bit of needle and thread. But it is a good roof. It is a roof that you have carried on your own back for hundreds of miles. It has protected you while you slept in ditches and under bushes. Now it is the crown of your new home. You walk around the hut, checking the edges. You tuck the bottom of the cloth under the top log to make sure no rain can blow inside. You use your hatchet to hammer a few wooden pegs into the ground to hold the rope steady. Each hit of the hatchet makes a dull thud in the cold dirt. You are making your world secure. You are making sure that when you go to sleep tonight, you will be dry. The sun is almost gone now. The light is turning a deep dark blue. You look at your hut from a distance. It looks like a sturdy little box with a white hat. It looks brave against the dark forest. You see your friends coming back with more wood for the next job. They look at the roof and nod. They are happy to see the white cloth. It means the building is almost over. It means the outside has finally been shut out. You feel a sense of warmth in your chest, even though your hands are cold. You have done it. You have built walls of wood. You have sealed them with the earth, and you have covered them with the sky-coloured cloth. You are no longer just a man in the woods. You are a man with a house. You step back inside one last time. You look up at the ridgepole. It is a strong piece of oak holding up the weight of the canvas. It looks like the rafters of a real cottage. You sit down on the dirt floor. The ground is still cold, but the air around you is quiet. The wind is blowing harder now, and you can hear the trees groaning. But inside the hut, the air is still. You watch the canvas roof move slightly as the wind pushes against it. It ripples like the surface of a lake. It is a beautiful, peaceful sight. You know that soon you will add a floor of pine needles and a fire in the corner. But for now, the roof is the greatest gift of all. You take a deep breath. The air inside smells of the fresh-cut ridgepole and the old familiar cotton. It is a good smell. It is the smell of a job well done. You have completed the lid of your box. You have won another victory against the coming winter. The watchman of the hut is starting to feel the first real sense of safety. You are ready for the dark to come because you have a place to hide from it. The hut is now a box with a lid, but it is a cold box. Without a fire, the dampness from the logs and the wet mud will stay inside. You can feel the chill sitting in the corners of the room. It feels like a heavy, invisible weight. To make this hut a home, you need a hearth. A hearth is the place where the fire lives, but you cannot just light a fire on the dirt floor. The smoke would fill the room, stinging your eyes and making it hard to breathe. You need a way to guide the smoke up and out. You need to build a chimney. You look at the back wall of your hut. When you were stacking the logs, you left a large gap about 3 feet wide. This is the fire bay. It is the starting point for your chimney. You step outside into the biting air. The wind is stronger now, and it tries to pull the heat from your body. You walk to the pile of wood you gathered earlier. For the chimney, you do not need big, heavy logs like the ones in the walls. You need smaller pieces. You need chimney sticks. These sticks are about 2 feet long and 2 inches thick. You have spent some time splitting larger logs into these smaller pieces. They are straight and clean. You pick up a handful. They feel light and dry in your hands. You also gather a large pile of rocks from the creek. You want the very bottom of the chimney, where the fire is hottest, to be made of stone. Stone does not burn. It holds the heat and stays safe. One simple historical fact about these winter camps is that chimneys were the most dangerous part of the hut. Because stone was hard to find, most soldiers built their chimneys out of wood and mud. They called these stick and mud, or cat in the chimney, chimneys. If the mud coating inside got too thin or cracked, the wooden sticks would catch fire. Many soldiers woke up in the middle of the night to find their whole house burning down because of a bad chimney. You begin by building the base. You lay the heavy stones in the gap in the wall. You use the wet clay mud as mortar. Mortar is like a glue made of earth that holds the stones together. You press the stones into the mud, making a flat, solid floor for your fire. You then build up the sides with more stones until they're about 1 foot high. This is the firebox. It is the heart of the hut. Now, you begin the stick part of the work. You take 4 of your chimney sticks. You lay 2 of them across the stone sides, and then you lay the other 2 on top of those, going the other way. You are building a small wooden square. It looks a bit like a tiny log cabin for a bird. You use a big glob of mud at each corner to hold the sticks in place. Then you add another layer, and another. The square begins to rise up the outside of your wall. Every time you add a layer of sticks, you must do the most important part of the job. You must plaster the inside. You reach into your mud bucket and take a large handful of the thick grey clay. You reach inside the wooden square and smear the mud all over the sticks. You make the layer very thick, about 2 inches deep. You smooth it out with your hands until the wood is completely hidden. This mud will dry hard like a brick. It will act as a shield. When the flames leap up, they will hit the mud, not the wood. The work is repetitive and slow. Stack 4 sticks, add mud to the corners and plaster the inside. Stack 4 sticks, add mud and plaster. You can feel the mud drying on your forearms. It makes your skin feel tight and itchy. Your back starts to ache from bending over the rising stack of wood, but you keep going. You want the chimney to be tall. If a chimney is too short, the smoke will not draw. Drawing is when the hot air rises and pulls the smoke up with it. A tall chimney creates a better pull. As the chimney gets higher, it reaches the level of your roof. You have to be very careful here. You don't want the chimney to touch the canvas of your roof. If the hot wood or a stray spark touches the cloth, your roof will be gone in seconds. You build the chimney so it stands a few inches away from the wall and the canvas. Now, you use a special microhistory detail. You look at a large wooden barrel sitting nearby. It is an old flour barrel that the army was going to throw away. It is made of thin wooden slats held together by metal hoops. You have knocked the top and the bottom out of the barrel, so it is just a wooden tube. You and your friend lift the heavy barrel and place it on top of your stick and mud chimney. This barrel is a chimney top. It adds another 3 feet of height to your stack, without you having to build more stick layers. It also helps the smoke move straight up into the wind. Many soldiers use barrels or even old wooden crates for this. It looks a bit funny, a log house with a flour barrel on the roof, but it is very clever. You use more mud to seal the gap between the last layer of sticks and the bottom of the barrel. You want it to be airtight. You take a moment of atmospheric silence. You step back from the chimney and look up. The sun has almost set, and the sky is a deep, dark indigo. You look through the hole in the firebox, through the square of sticks, and up through the open barrel. You can see a single bright star shining down at you through the chimney. It is a very strange and beautiful sight. It is like looking through a long, dark telescope. The air is perfectly still for a moment. You can hear the distant sound of a bugle playing taps in another part of the camp. The sound is thin and lonely, but it reminds you that you are part of a giant family. You feel a deep sense of peace. Your machine for warmth is almost ready. You walk back inside the hut. The firebox looks like a dark cave in the wall. You reach up and feel the inside of the chimney. The mud is still wet and cool. It will take a little while to dry, but the first small fire will help that happen. You look at your friends. They are tired, but they are smiling. The chimney is the final piece of the puzzle. With a chimney, you can have light, you can have heat, you can have heat, you can cook your food. You pick up your hatchet one last time for the day. You go to the woods and find some very dry, thin branches. These are kindling. They catch fire very easily. You bring them back and lay them in a small pile on the stone floor of the firebox. You also find some bigger logs that are dry. You place them on top of the kindling. You are not going to build a giant fire yet. You don't want to crack the wet mud, but you want a small, steady flame. You reach into your pocket and pull out a small tin box. Inside are your matches. They're called lucifers. They have a sharp chemical smell. You take one out and strike it against a dry stone. Fritch, a bright yellow flame appears. You hold it to the dry leaves and small sticks under your wood pile. The fire starts slowly. A tiny curl of white smoke rises up. It moves toward the back of the firebox. It pauses for a second, as if it is lost. Then it finds the opening of the chimney. The smoke begins to move upward. You watch it go. It enters the stick and mud tunnel and disappears. You run outside to look at the roof. A thin grey ribbon of smoke is drifting out of the top of the flour barrel. It looks like a beautiful silk scarf waving in the wind. The chimney is working. The smoke is leaving the house, which means the heat is staying inside. You feel a wave of warmth spread through your body, not from the fire yet, but from the joy of success. You go back inside and sit on the dirt floor near the hearth. The small flames are dancing now. They cast long, flickering shadows on the mud-chinked walls. The orange light makes the pine logs look warm and golden. The flack of the axes outside has stopped. The camp is settling down. You lean toward the fire and hold out your hands. They are covered in dried grey mud and small scratches from the sticks. The heat from the flames hits your skin. It feels like a miracle. After days of being cold, after nights of shivering under a thin blanket, the warmth is finally here. You can smell the wood smoke and the drying clay. It is the best smell in the world. The chimney stands strong against the night wind. It is a humble thing made of sticks, mud, and a discarded barrel. But it is the difference between suffering and comfort. You are the watchman of this fire. You will keep it small tonight to let the mud dry slowly. You will watch the smoke drift up toward the stars. You are no longer just surviving the winter. You are living in it. You are warm. You are home. The fire is burning low and steady in the hearth, and the walls are standing strong. Your hut feels like a real place now, but there is still one big problem. There is a hole in your front wall. It is the space you left for a door. Right now, it is just an empty rectangle that lets the cold night air rush inside. When you sit by the fire, you can feel the warmth on your face, but you feel a freezing draft on your back. It is like the winter is reaching in with a long, icy hand to touch your shoulder. To be truly warm, you must finish the house. You must build a door that can shut the world out. You stand up and walk to the doorway. You look out at the camp. The sun has gone down completely now, and the world is a deep, dark blue. You see the orange glows of hundreds of other fires reflecting off the white canvas roofs of the huts. It looks like a city of paper lanterns. You can hear the low hum of thousands of men talking, and the distant sound of a horse neighing in the cold. But you want to be away from all that. You want to be in your own space. You look at the pile of wood scraps left over from building the walls and the chimney. You have a plan. You do not have a sawmill to make flat boards for a door. You have to be clever with what you have. You look at a stack of wooden crates sitting near the wagon tracks. These are hardtack boxes. Hardtack is the name for the very hard, dry crackers that you eat every day. These crackers come in large wooden boxes made of thin, rough pine. Once the crackers are eaten, the boxes are usually just used for firewood. But for a soldier, a hardtack box is like a treasure chest of building material. The wood is light, thin, and easy to work with. One simple historical fact about these winter camps is that hardtack boxes were the most useful things in the army. Soldiers used the wood to make doors, tables, chairs, and even small boxes to keep their letters in. Without these food crates, many huts would have remained empty and cold. They were the bricks of the soldiers' furniture. You can still see the black ink on the wood where the words US Army or bread are printed. It gives your door a bit of history. You take your hatchet and carefully take 3 boxes apart. You use the back of the hatchet to tap the boards until the small iron nails pop loose. You save every single nail. Nails are very hard to find in the woods. If you drop one in the dirt, you spend 10 minutes on your knees looking for it. You put the nails in your pocket where they feel cold and heavy against your leg. Soon you have a pile of flat, thin boards. They smell faintly of salt and flour from the crackers they used to hold. It is a dry, dusty smell that reminds you of lunch on a hot summer day. You lay the boards out on the dirt floor of your hut. You arrange them in a rectangle that is just a little bit bigger than the hole in your wall. You want the door to overlap the logs so the wind cannot find a way around the edges. You place 3 long boards side by side, then you take 2 shorter boards and lay them across the top and bottom. This is called a Z frame or a brace. It keeps the door from leaning or sagging over time. You reach into your pocket for the nails. You pick up a heavy stone from the hearth to use as a hammer. Clink, clink, clink. You drive the nails through the thin pine boards. The sound is sharp and metallic inside the quiet hut. Each nail goes in with a bit of a struggle because the wood is dry and hard. You have to be careful not to split the boards. You work slowly, focusing on the way the metal bites into the wood. You feel the vibration of each strike go up your arm. Once the door is built, it is just a flat wooden lid. Now you have to find a way to make it move. You need hinges. Of course, you do not have metal hinges from a shop. You have to look at your own gear. You find an old pair of leather boots that are too worn out to wear. The soles are gone and the leather is cracked. This is your micro-history detail, the leather hinge. You take your knife and cut 2 long wide strips of leather from the tops of the boots. The leather is thick and smells like old grease and mud. It is very strong. You nail one end of the leather strips to the side of your new door. Then you carry the door to the opening in the wall. It is surprisingly light. You hold it up against the logs and your friend helps you hold it steady. You nail the other end of the leather strips to the thick log of the door frame. You use 2 nails for each strip, driving them deep into the bark. You step back and look at it. The leather is dark against the pale pine of the boards. Now comes the moment of truth. You reach out and grab the edge of the door. You pull it toward you. The leather hinge has grown a little bit, but they hold. The door swings open. You push it back, and it swings shut. It does not fit perfectly. There is a little gap at the bottom where the dirt is uneven, but it is a real door. You have made a way to close the world out. You take a moment of atmospheric silence. You stand in the doorway, halfway in and halfway out. The air outside is moving, and you can feel it pulling at your hair. But inside, the air is perfectly still. You look at the hinges. You look at the rough, salt-smelling wood. You think about how strange it is that a cracker box and an old boot can make a home. You listen to the sound of the wind. It is a high, thin whistle in the trees. But when you pull the door shut, that sound suddenly changes. It becomes a low, muffled hum. The world feels smaller, but it feels much safer. You are no longer part of the giant camp. You are inside your own house. You decide to add one last thing to the door. A handle. You find a piece of thick rope that was used to tie a bundle of hay. You poke 2 holes through the middle of the door with your knife. You thread the rope through and tie a big knot on both sides. Now you have a soft, fuzzy handle to pull the door shut. It feels rough and prickly in your hand, but it works perfectly. You also take a small piece of wood and nail it to the log frame on the inside. This is a latch. When you turn the piece of wood, it holds the door tight so the wind cannot blow it open. You walk outside to see how the door looks from the street. In the dark, the white pine boards of the door glow against the dark brown logs. It looks like a friendly face. You see the black ink of the bread label upside down on one of the boards. It makes you smile. You look down the line of huts in your company. Every man is doing something different. Some have doors made of heavy canvas blankets. Some have doors made of woven branches. Yours is one of the few made of real wood. You feel a little bit of pride. You have used your tools and your brain to make something sturdy. The frost is starting to form on the ground now. You can see the tiny white crystals growing on the edges of the wood chips. You can feel the cold moving up through the soles of your boots. It is time to go inside for good. You step over the threshold and reach for your rope handle. You pull the door shut. Thud. The sound is solid and deep. You turn the wooden latch until it clicks. Inside the hut, the atmosphere has completely changed. The fire in the hearth is the only light. The orange flames cast dancing shadows on the mud walls and the canvas roof. The room feels very warm now. Without the draft from the door, the heat from the fire is starting to fill the space. You take off your heavy blue-grey coat. You don't need it inside anymore. You are just in your wool shirt. The air feels soft against your skin. You sit down near the fire and look at your door. You can see the tiny bits of light peeking through the cracks between the boards, but the wind cannot get through. The leather hinges are holding strong. You feel a deep sense of peace. For the first time in a very long time, you are in a room with 4 walls, a roof, and a door that stays shut. You are no longer at the mercy of the weather. You have built a fortress. You reach into your pocket and find a small piece of hardtack. You look at the cracker, then you look at the door made from the box it came in. It is a funny thought. The army gives you food, and then you use the leftover pieces of that food to build your life. Everything has a use. Nothing is thrown away. You dip the cracker into your tin cup of water to soften it. You listen to the sound of the night. Outside, you hear the crunch, crunch, crunch of the sentry walking his beat in the snow. You hear the wind rattling the canvas of the roof. But these sounds feel far away. They belong to the outside world. Inside, there is only the sound of the fire popping and the steady breathing of your friends. You are the watchman of this little wooden world. You have hung the cover against the frost, and you have won. You lean your back against the logs, close to the fire, and let the warmth soak into your bones. The door is shut. The night is out. You are home. As you sit there, you notice how the firelight reflects off the smooth leather of the hinges. They look like dark, polished stones. You think about the boots those hinges came from. They walked through the mud of Virginia and the dust of Maryland. Now they have a new job. They aren't moving you forward anymore. They are keeping you still. They are helping you rest. You watch the smoke from the fire move toward the chimney. Everything is working exactly the way it should. You feel a heavy, sleepy weight in your limbs. The hard work of the day is finally over. You have a door, and that makes all the difference. You stand in the middle of your new home and look down. The walls are solid, the roof is tight, and the fire is warm, but the ground beneath your feet is still just cold, hard dirt. It is a dark brown color, and in some spots it is still a bit damp from the winter air. If you were to lie down now, the cold from the earth would soak right through your clothes and into your bones. It would be like sleeping on a cake of ice. A soldier's home is not finished until he has a place to rest his head that is soft and dry. You need to build a bed. You pick up your hatchet and your empty haversack. You step back out through the door, leaving the warmth of the fire behind for just a little while. The sun has gone now, but the moon is rising. It is a big pale moon that makes the snow in the clearing look like silver. You walk away from the noise of the camp, heading toward the edge of the woods, where the pine trees grow thick and tall. The air is very still here. The wind does not blow as hard under the heavy branches of the evergreens. You find a young pine tree with branches that hang low to the ground. You reach out and touch the needles. They are long, green, and covered in a tiny bit of frost that sparkles in the moonlight. When you rub them between your fingers, they release a very strong, sweet smell. It is a clean smell, like the deep woods and the fresh winter air. You begin to cut the smaller, softer branches. These are the ones you want. You don't want the thick, woody parts. You want the tips that are full of springy needles. One simple historical fact about these winter camps is that the soldiers had a special name for these pine branches. They called them soldiers' feathers, even though the branches were just sticks and needles to a man who had been sleeping on the bare ground for months. They felt as soft and as fancy as a bed made of bird feathers in a grand house. It was the best sleep a man could get in the middle of a war. You work quickly but carefully. You want to gather a very large pile. You cut branch after branch, laying them into a neat stack. The sap from the wood is sticky on your hands. It feels like thick honey and smells like the heart of the forest. It is hard to wash off, but you like the way it reminds you of the trees. Soon your arms are full. You have a giant bundle of green branches that reaches up to your chin. You carry them back toward your hut, walking slowly so you do not trip. As you walk, you experience a moment of atmospheric silence. You stop at the edge of the woods and look back at the camp. Thousands of tiny orange sparks from the chimneys are rising into the dark sky. It looks like the stars have fallen to the earth and are dancing on the roofs of the huts. Everything is quiet. You can hear the distant, muffled sound of a drum, but here, under the moon, the world feels peaceful. You take a deep breath of the cold air. You feel very small in the middle of this big, dark world, but you also feel very lucky to have your bundle of feathers and a warm place to go. You reach your hut and kick the door open with your boot. You drop the green branches onto the dirt floor in the corner furthest from the fire. The room suddenly smells like a forest. You and your friends begin to make the bed. This is not like making a bed at home with sheets and pillows. It is more like building a nest. You don't just throw the branches down in a pile. You have to layer them. You start at the head of the bed. You lay the first row of branches with the cut ends pointing toward the wall and the soft needle ends pointing toward the middle of the room. Then you take the next row and lay them on top, covering the woody sticks of the first row with the soft needles of the second. You keep doing this, row after row, moving down toward the foot of the bed. It is just like putting shingles on a roof. When you are finished, you cannot see any of the hard, brown sticks. All you can see is a thick, green carpet of soft needles. You push down on the bed with your hand. It has a wonderful bounce to it. The branches act like little springs, holding your body up off the cold ground. This spring is very important. It keeps the air moving under you, which helps to keep the dampness away from your back. It also means that if a little bit of water ever did get onto the floor, you would be high and dry above it. Now you reach for your most important piece of gear. This is your micro-history detail, the gum blanket. This is a piece of heavy canvas that has been coated on one side with a thick layer of black, smelly rubber. It is a very clever invention. The rubber side is completely waterproof. You lay the gum blanket over the top of your pine branches with the rubber side facing down toward the needles. This creates a barrier. No moisture from the green wood or the dirt floor can get through to you. It also keeps the prickly needles from poking you through your clothes. You and your 3 messmates share this big bed. In a winter hut, you do not sleep alone. You sleep in a row, side by side, like sardines in a tin. This is not just because the hut is small, it is to stay alive. When 4 men lie together, their body heat creates a warm pocket under the blankets. You share your covers too. You lay 2 blankets down on top of the gum blanket to make it soft. Then, the 4 of you lie down and pull the rest of the blankets over all of you at once. You take off your boots and set them near the hearth. Your feet feel strange and light without the heavy leather. You climb onto the pine bed. It makes a soft crunching sound as it settles under your weight. You can feel the spring of the branches. It feels amazing. After weeks of sleeping on the hard frozen earth, this feels like the softest bed in the world. You can feel the warmth from the fire reflecting off the walls and settling over you. The smell of the pine is very strong now that you are lying right on it. It is a very relaxing smell. It makes your brain feel quiet. You look at the roof above you. The white canvas is glowing in the firelight. You can see the shadows of the pine needles through the cloth. You feel very safe. The wind is hitting the logs of the hut, and you can hear it whistling in the chimney, but it cannot reach you. You are tucked away in your green, sweet-smelling nest. You reach out and touch the wool blanket. It is heavy and a bit scratchy, but it is warm. You pull it up to your chin. You look at your friends. They are all settling in too. One of them is already starting to breathe deeply and slowly. The work of the day, the chopping, the lifting, the digging, and the gathering, is all finished. You have built a house from nothing but trees and mud. You have made a door from cracker boxes and a bed from soldiers' feathers. You lie there for a long time, just watching the fire. The orange flames are getting smaller, turning into glowing red coals. The shadows on the wall are soft and slow. You feel a deep, heavy tiredness in your muscles, but it is not a painful feeling. It is the feeling of a body that has done good work. You feel proud of your little hut. It is not a palace, and it is not a big house in a city, but it is yours. It is the place where you will survive the winter. The watchman of the night is finally ready to rest. You have done everything you can to prepare. The walls are tight, the roof is on, the fire is lit, and the bed is soft. You close your eyes and let the scent of the pine take you away. You don't think about the march tomorrow or the cold morning. You only think about the warmth of the blankets and the springy branches beneath you. You are safe. You are warm. You are finally home for the night. You drift off to sleep, wrapped in the smell of the forest and the glow of the hearth. The first real night in your winter home has begun. The hut is quiet now, save for the soft crackle of the wood in the fireplace. You are lying on your bed of pine needles, and for the first time in days, your body feels truly still. But even in sleep, a soldier must be careful. You wake up in the middle of the night because the air in the hut has grown a little bit sharp. The fire has burned down to a pile of glowing red eyes. You sit up slowly, trying not to wake your sleeping friends. The room is dark, lit only by the soft orange pulse of the embers. It is time to perform the most important job of the night. You need to tend to the fire. You slide out from under the heavy blankets. The air in the room is much warmer than the air outside, but it is still cool enough to make you shiver as you move away from your friends. You walk across the dirt floor in your thick wool socks. You reach for the woodpile next to the hearth. You pick up a large, heavy log. It is a piece of oak you saved specifically for this moment. Oak is a hard wood, which means it burns slowly and holds its heat for a long time. One simple historical fact about these fires is that they were the only clock the soldiers had at night. If the fire went out, the room would become freezing in less than an hour. The men would take turns waking up to feed the beast, as they sometimes called the hearth. It was a silent promise they made to each other. I will keep the fire going so you can sleep in peace. You use a small stick to poke at the red coals. As you move them, tiny sparks fly up into the dark chimney like miniature stars. This is your micro-history detail, the fire poke. Most soldiers didn't have iron tools, so they used a fire stick made of green hickory wood. Hickory is very tough and does not catch fire easily when it is fresh. You use the stick to push the hot coals into a neat pile in the center of the stone floor. Then you carefully place the big oak log on top. You stay there for a moment of atmospheric silence. You are kneeling on the cold earth, but your face is inches away from the heat of the firebox. You watch as a tiny blue flame licks the side of the new log. Then the flame turns yellow, and then a bright, happy orange. You can hear the wood sigh as the heat finds the moisture inside. It makes a soft, whistling sound. The light from the new flame starts to grow, reaching out to touch the corners of the hut. You see the shadow of your own head grow large and soft against the mud-chinked walls. Everything feels very old and very simple. You are just a man, a fire, and the dark night. As the log catches, the room begins to warm up again. You can feel the heat hitting your chest and your arms. It is a deep, soaking heat that makes your muscles relax. You look at the chimney you built. You see the smoke moving perfectly up the stick and mud tunnel. It is a good feeling to see your work performing so well. You think about the night shift workers back in the cities, the people in the bakeries and the factories, and you feel a connection to them. You are all doing your jobs while the rest of the world is tucked away. You reach for a small tin pot sitting on a stone near the fire. Inside is a little bit of water. You place it closer to the flames. You aren't really thirsty, but you like the sound of the water beginning to simmer. It makes a tiny, cheerful humming noise. It is the sound of comfort. You sit back on your heels and just watch the fire for a few more minutes. You want to make sure the big log is truly burning before you go back to bed. The fire is the heart of the hut. It is more than just heat. It is company. In the flickering light, the rough logs of the walls look beautiful. You can see the patterns in the bark and the grey lines of the dried mud. You feel a great sense of safety. Outside, the winter is waiting. The frost is thick on the trees and the wind is looking for a way in. But here, the fire is the guard. As long as the oak log burns, the winter cannot enter. You see the flames settle into a steady golden glow. The log is blackening and starting to crackle. You know it will last until the sun comes up. You stand up quietly. Your shadow moves with you, dancing across the canvas roof. You walk back to the bed of soldiers' feathers. You slide back under the blankets, feeling the warmth of your friends beside you. The bed is still soft and springy. As you close your eyes, you feel the warmth from the hearth drifting over you like a soft hand. The smell of the oak smoke is faint and sweet. You are the watchman of the fire, and your shift is done for now. You let the heaviness of sleep pull at you again. You are safe in your wooden box, protected by the trees, the mud, and the flame. The long winter night continues, but you are warm. You are at rest. The light of the morning is very soft as it comes through the white canvas of your roof. It is a pale, milky color that fills the hut with a gentle glow. You wake up slowly. The air inside the house is cool, but it is not freezing like the air outside the walls. You can feel the warmth of your friends beside you, and the thick wool blankets feel heavy and good on your legs. For a moment you just lie there, listening. You hear the soft, rhythmic sound of your messmates breathing. You hear the fire in the hearth making a tiny clicking noise as the last of the oak log turns into white ash. You sit up and rub your eyes. Your hair is messy, and your face feels a bit stiff from the sleep, but you feel rested. You reach for your boots. They are sitting near the fire, and when you touch the leather, it feels warm. This is one of the little joys of living in a hut. In the summer, your boots were always damp and cold in the morning. Here, they are dry and toasted by the fire. You pull them on and lace them up, the leather feeling soft and flexible against your feet. Today, you are the one who will cook the first meal. You stand up and walk to the small pile of wood by the chimney. You add a few thin sticks to the red coals. You blow on them softly, your breath moving the grey ash. A tiny yellow flame jumps up, then another. Soon, the fire is bright and lively again. The shadows of the logs dance on the mud walls. You reach for your mess kit. One simple historical fact about the food you ate is that the army mostly gave you two things: salt pork and hardtack. Salt pork was the main meat. It was kept in big wooden barrels filled with very salty water, called brine. The salt helped the meat stay good for a long time, even without a cold place to keep it. It was very salty and very fatty, but it gave a soldier the energy he needed to do the hard work of the camp. You reach into your haversack and pull out a piece of this salt pork. It is a thick, square slab. It is a pale pink color with stripes of white fat. You can see the tiny white crystals of salt on the surface. It feels cold and a bit slippery in your hand. This is your microhistory detail, the mess pan. Your mess pan is made of heavy tin. It is round and has a long handle that can fold over the top. It looks like a small, shallow bucket with no lid. You have used this pan to cook every meal for a year. It is black on the bottom from the soot of 1,000 fires, but the inside is kept clean and shiny. You take your pocket knife out of your trousers. The blade is small and sharp. You begin to slice the pork into thin pieces. You move slowly, focusing on the work. You want the slices to be thin so they cook quickly and get crispy. As you cut, the smell of the salt and the meat fills the air. It is a strong, honest smell. You lay the slices in the bottom of your tin pan. They make a soft, wet sound as they hit the metal. You move to the hearth and find a good spot. You do not put the pan right into the big flames. If you did that, the meat would burn on the outside and stay raw on the inside. Instead, you use your fire stick to pull a pile of glowing orange coals to the edge of the stone floor. This creates a natural stove. You set your pan directly onto the hot coals. Now you wait. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. You sit on your heels in front of the fire. The morning light is getting stronger now, and you can see a thin beam of sun peeking through a tiny gap in the door. The beam is full of dancing dust motes that look like tiny bits of gold. You watch the pan. For a minute nothing happens. Then you hear it, a tiny sizzle, then a louder pop. The white fat on the pork begins to melt, turning into a clear, bubbling liquid. The edges of the meat start to curl up and turn a beautiful, deep brown. The smell changes. It is no longer just salty. It is rich and savory. It is the smell of breakfast. You can see the steam rising from the pan, moving in slow circles before it gets pulled up into the dark mouth of the chimney. You watch the grease bubble and dance. It looks like a tiny, boiling sea. You feel the heat of the fire on your face, and it feels wonderful. Your stomach makes a loud growling sound. You are very hungry. You use a small twig to flip the pieces of pork over. The other side is already a golden brown color. You press down on them, and more grease hisses as it hits the hot tin. You think about how lucky you are to have this fire and this pan. Just a few weeks ago, you were eating cold bread in the rain. Now, you have a hot meal in a warm house. It makes the pork taste even better in your mind. As the meat finishes cooking, you reach for your hardtack. You have 2 square crackers. They are as hard as pieces of wood. You could not eat them as they are. You would break a tooth. You have a clever trick, though. You take the hardtack and put it into the pan with the pork grease. The crackers soak up the hot fat. They start to soften and turn a bit brown. This makes them taste like a fried biscuit. It is a very simple way to make a boring meal feel like a feast. The sound of the sizzling pork wakes up your friends. One by one, they sit up in their pine needle beds. They sniff the air and smile. "Smells good," one of them says in a sleepy voice. You nod. You feel a sense of pride. You are taking care of your family. You are the one who turned the cold morning into a warm breakfast. You take the pan off the coals and set it on a flat stone. The grease is still bubbling, but the sound is getting softer. You divide the meat and the fried bread among your messmates. You use your tin plate, which is just the bottom of your mess kit. The metal is hot against your hand, so you use a bit of your wool sleeve to hold it. You take your first bite of the pork. It is very salty, and the fat is rich and warm. It melts on your tongue. A hardtack is soft now, and it tastes of the meat and the smoke. It is the best thing you have eaten in a long time. You chew slowly, enjoying every bit of the flavor. You feel the warmth of the food moving down into your chest. It gives you a sudden burst of energy. You feel that you could walk 20 miles today, though you are glad you don't have to. You and your friends eat in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds are the clicking of the fire and the scraping of your spoons against the tin plates. It is a very peaceful time. The world outside is starting to wake up. You can hear the sounds of the camp through the log walls. You hear the distant clank of a bucket and the sound of a sergeant shouting a command. But inside the hut, it is quiet and private. You are safe in your little wooden world. You look at the walls of your hut. The light is hitting the mud chinking, making it look like pale ribbons between the dark logs. You see the smoke from your fire moving steadily up the chimney. Everything is working perfectly. You built this. You made this place where a man can wake up, cook a meal, and be warm. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction. When the meal is finished, you take a piece of dry bread and wipe the last of the grease from your pan. You don't want to waste a single drop of the fat. Every bit of it is fuel for your body. You set the pan aside to be cleaned later with a bit of sand and water. You lean back against the log wall and let out a long, happy breath. The night shift of the fire watcher is over, and the day shift of the soldier is beginning. But today, the work will be easy. You might have to clean your gear or stand guard for an hour, but mostly you will just live in your house. You will sit by the fire and talk with your friends. You will be warm. You look at the small pile of red coals that cooked your breakfast. They are still glowing, holding the heat of the oak wood. You feel a connection to the men who lived hundreds of years ago, who sat by fires just like this one. You are part of a long story of people finding ways to be comfortable in a hard world. You feel a sense of peace and safety. The watchman of the morning is full and warm. The winter camp is a good place to be. You close your eyes for a second, feeling the warmth of the hearth and the goodness of the meal. You are ready for whatever the day brings. The salt pork has warmed your belly, but no morning in the winter camp is truly complete without a cup of coffee. To a soldier, coffee is more than just a drink. It is the lifeblood of the army. It is the thing that helps you shake off the heavy blanket of sleep and prepares your mind for the day ahead. You reach for your tin cup, which has been sitting on a flat stone near the edge of the hearth. It is a large, simple cup made of heavy tin with a sturdy handle that stays relatively cool even when the water inside is boiling. You walk over to your haversack and pull out a small, hand-sewn cloth bag. This is your coffee bag. When you open the drawstring, the smell that wafts out is heavenly. It is dark, earthy, and a little bit nutty. Inside are the beans. Sometimes the army gives you the beans already roasted, but often they are green and hard as pebbles. If they are green, you have to roast them yourself in a pan over the fire until they turn a dark, oily brown. Your beans today are already a beautiful chocolate color. One simple historical fact about coffee in the Civil War is that it was so important that some soldiers were given special rifles with a coffee mill built right into the wooden stock. However, most men just use the back of their hatchets. You take a few beans and place them on a flat, clean log. You use the heavy head of your hatchet to crush them. Crunch, crunch, crunch. You aren't looking for a fine powder like you might find in the shop back home. You just want to break the beans into small bits so the hot water can get to the flavor inside. This is your micro-history detail, the mucker. A mucker is a term some soldiers used for their large tin cups, but it also refers to the way they made their coffee. You don't have a fancy pot or a filter. You simply throw the crushed beans directly into the water. You fill your cup from your wooden water bucket and set it right on the hot coals at the edge of the fire. You sit back and wait. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. The hut is filled with the soft blue light of a winter morning. You can hear the water in the cup beginning to wake up. First, there are tiny bubbles that make a faint clicking sound against the tin. Then a low, steady hum begins. Finally, the water starts to roll and boil. The dark bits of coffee dance around in the bubbles, turning the clear water into a deep, rich black. The smell is incredible. It fills the small space of the hut, mixing with the scent of the pine needle bed and the lingering aroma of the fried pork. It is a smell that promises energy. You use a small stick to nudge the cup away from the hottest part of the fire. You don't want it to boil over and spill into the ashes. You let it steep for a minute, which just means you let it sit so the flavor gets stronger, to settle the grounds. The little bits of crushed bean at the bottom of the cup, you use an old soldier's trick. You take a spoonful of cold water from your bucket and pour it quickly into the hot coffee. The cold water is heavier and sinks to the bottom, taking the grounds down with it. Now, you can drink the top part without getting a mouthful of grit. You pick up the cup carefully. The tin is hot, so you hold it by the very bottom of the handle or wrap a bit of your wool sleeve around it. You blow on the dark liquid, watching the steam swirl and vanish. You take your first sip. It is very hot and very bitter, but it is wonderful. You can feel the warmth travel from your lips, down your throat, and right into the center of your chest. It feels like a small fire is being lit inside you. As you drink, you look at your messmates. They are doing the same, each holding their own cup and staring into the fire. No one talks much. The coffee is doing its work, clearing the cobwebs from your brain. You feel your eyes open a bit wider. You notice the small details of your home, the way the mud chinking has dried into a pattern of fine lines, and the way the canvas roof ripples in the wind like the surface of a pond. The coffee is more than just a drink. It is a ritual. It is a moment of peace before the chores of the day begin. You feel a sense of deep contentment. The winter might be cold and the war might be long, but right here, in this moment, you have a warm hut, a full belly, and a hot cup of coffee. You're the watchman of this morning and you are ready. You take one last sip, tasting the dark, smoky flavor, and feel the strength returning to your limbs. The day is yours. The fire is burning well, and the coffee has done its work to wake up your spirit. But as you sit near the hearth, you notice a heavy, damp feeling in your shoulders. You look down at your greatcoat. The thick blue wool is dark and heavy. Yesterday, while you were chopping trees and mixing mud, the mist and the light snow soaked deep into the fabric. A wet coat is a dangerous thing in a winter camp. It pulls the heat away from your skin and makes your muscles feel like lead. Now that the hut is warm, it is time to take care of your most important piece of clothing. You stand up and look for a place to hang your coat. You cannot just lay it on the pine needle bed, or the needles will stick to the damp wool and make a mess. You need a drying rack. You find a long, sturdy branch that you saved from the pine trees. You wedge one end of the branch into a gap between the logs of the wall, high up near the roof. You rest the other end on a similar gap on the opposite wall. Now you have a wooden bar crossing the room, right above the path of the rising heat from the fire. You lift your heavy coat and drape it over the bar. The wool feels cold and slimy against your hands. It is much heavier than it should be because of all the water trapped inside. As the coat settles over the branch, you see the first few drops of water fall onto the dirt floor. Plink, plink. You move the coat so it is not directly over the flames. You don't want to singe the wool, but close enough that the warm air from the hearth flows over it. One simple historical fact about the greatcoat is that it was made of kersey wool. This was a very tough, thick type of cloth that was woven tightly to keep out the wind. It was wonderful for staying warm, but once it got truly soaked, it could take a whole day to dry out. A wet greatcoat could weigh 20 pounds or more, making it a very tiring thing to wear on a long march. You sit back down by the fire and watch the coat. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. The only sound in the hut is the soft hiss of the moisture leaving the wool. You see a thin white ghost of steam begin to rise from the shoulders of the coat. It curls and twists in the air, caught in the updraft of the chimney. The steam smells of wet sheep, old wood smoke, and the dust of the road. It is a very specific smell that every soldier knows. It is the smell of a winter laundry day. As the coat warms up, the room starts to feel a bit humid. The air becomes heavy and soft, like the air in a kitchen when a big pot of water is boiling. You feel the dampness leaving your own shirt as well. You take off your wool cap and set it on a warm stone near the hearth. Your head feels light and cool. You reach out and touch the hem of the coat. It is still cold and wet at the bottom, but the top is starting to feel warm to the touch. This is your microhistory detail, the brass buttons. Your coat has a long row of buttons down the front, each one stamped with the image of an eagle. They are dull and spotted with mud right now. While the coat dries, you take a small piece of rough cloth and a bit of dry ash from the edge of the fire. You rub the ash onto the buttons. The grit of the ash acts like a polish. Slowly, the dull brown disappears, and the bright, happy shine of the brass comes back. The eagle seems to wake up as the metal catches the orange light of the fire. You spend a long time polishing each button. It is a slow, boring job, but it feels good to make something clean. It reminds you that even though you are living in a hut made of mud and sticks, you are still a soldier. You take pride in your gear. You look at the polished buttons and see tiny reflections of the fire dancing inside them. It makes the coat look almost new again. Every hour or so, you stand up and turn the coat. You want the back to dry as well as the front. You feel the steam rising against your face. It feels like a warm mist. The wool is starting to feel fluffy again instead of flat and wet. You run your hand over the sleeve. It is finally dry. The wool feels scratchy and honest. You know that when you put it on later to stand guard, it will hold your body heat like a thick, warm wall. You lean back against the log wall and watch the last bits of steam vanish. The hut is dry now. The dampness is gone. You feel light and comfortable. You have taken care of your coat, and in return, the coat will take care of you. The watchman of the hearth has finished the drying, and the world feels just a little bit warmer. The warmth of the hut is a wonderful thing, but your time of rest must come to an end for a while. It is your turn to stand guard. You stand up and pull on your greatcoat. It is now bone dry and warm from the fire. It feels light on your shoulders, and the wool smells clean and toasted. You pick up your heavy rifle and step toward the door. As you pull the latch and push the wooden door open, the cold hits you like a physical weight. The warm air from the hut rushes out into the night in a great white cloud of steam, and you step out into the night shift of the century. The world outside is transformed. It has snowed while you were drying your coat. A thick white blanket covers everything. The stumps of the trees look like small white ghosts, and the branches of the pines are bowing low under the weight of the powder. The sky is clear now, and the moon is so bright that you can see for a long way. The snow reflects the moonlight, making the whole camp look like it is made of silver and blue shadows. Your boots sink deep into the fresh snow with a loud, rhythmic crunch, crunch, crunch. One simple historical fact about guard duty is that it lasted for 2 hours at a time. A soldier would walk a beat, which was a straight line back and forth along the edge of the camp. For those 2 hours, you were the eyes and ears of the army. While thousands of men slept in their warm log huts, you stayed awake to make sure the enemy did not sneak through the dark woods. It was a lonely job, but it was very important. You reach the edge of the woods and begin your walk. The air is so cold, it makes the moisture in your nose freeze. Every time you breathe out, a thick plume of white mist hangs in the air for a second before drifting away. You wrap your wool muffler, a long, hand-knit scarf sent from home tighter, around your neck. You pull the collar of your greatcoat up so it covers your ears. The world is incredibly quiet. When you stop moving, the silence is so deep, it almost feels like a sound itself. This is your microhistory detail, the champion. This is a small plug made of wood or cork that you have placed into the end of your rifle barrel. It is a simple tool, but vital on a night like this. It keeps the falling snow and the damp mist out of the gun. If water got inside the barrel and froze, or if the gunpowder got damp, the rifle would not fire when you needed it. You check the champion with your thumb, feeling the smooth wood. It is tucked in tight, protecting the heart of your weapon. As you walk your beat, you experience a moment of atmospheric silence. You stop at the furthest point of your line and look deep into the forest. The shadows of the bare oak trees stretch out across the snow like long, dark fingers. You can hear a branch snap far away under the weight of the ice. Crack. The sound is as loud as a pistol shot in the still air. You hold your breath, listening. You hear the wind move through the high needles of the pines, a sound like a distant ocean. You feel very small out here, a tiny blue speck in a vast white wilderness. But you are not afraid. You are the watchman. You look back toward the camp. You see the long rows of log huts, their canvas roofs white and glowing under the moon. You see the thin ribbons of grey smoke rising straight up from the chimneys. Each of those ribbons represents a fire and a group of men sleeping safely because of you. You feel a sense of pride. You are the wall between your friends and the cold, dark night. Your feet are cold, and your hands are stiff inside your wool gloves, but your heart feels warm. To keep your blood moving, you flap your arms against your sides and stomp your feet. The movement helps a little. You think about the soldiers' feathers waiting for you back in the hut. You think about the way the fire looked when you left it. You count your steps to pass the time. 100 steps to the big rock. 100 steps back to the pine tree. The moon moves slowly across the sky, marking the minutes of your watch. Finally, you hear the sound of footsteps coming through the snow. It is the relief guard. You see the dark shape of a man approaching. You call out the challenge, your voice sounding rough in the frozen air. He gives the password, and you step aside. You hand over the responsibility of the watch. You are no longer the eyes of the camp. Your shift on the night shift is over. You walk back toward your hut, your legs feeling heavy and tired. You reach your door and pull the rope handle. As you step inside, the warmth of the hut wraps around you like a heavy blanket. The smell of the wood smoke and the pine needles is the most wonderful thing you have ever scented. You lean your rifle against the wall and pull off your heavy, snow-covered boots. You crawl back onto the springy bed of branches, sliding under the wool blankets next to your friends. The watchman of the snow has come home. You are safe, you are warm, and you are finally ready to sleep. The warmth of the hut has helped your hands find their feeling again, but as you pull off your boots, you see a problem. The long walk in the deep snow has been hard on your gear. The wetness and the cold have caused the old leather to stretch and pull. You look at the bottom of your right boot and see a gap. The thick sole is starting to pull away from the top part of the shoe. This is a flopper. If you do not fix it now, the snow will get inside and freeze your toes tomorrow. In the winter camp, your boots are your best friends, and you must take care of them. You sit down on a small wooden stool near the fire. You pick up the boot and look at it closely. It is covered in dried salt and grey mud. The leather is hard and stiff. To fix this, you need your housewife. This is a micro-history detail. The housewife is a small sewing kit that almost every soldier carries. It is usually a roll of scrap cloth with pockets for needles, pins, and thread. It was often made by a mother, a sister, or a wife back home. Inside yours, you have some very thick black thread called sinew thread. It is coated in wax to make it waterproof and very strong. One simple historical fact about these boots is that they were not made for the left foot or the right foot. They were straight boots. This means both boots were the exact same shape. You had to wear them for a long time until the leather stretched to fit your specific feet. Because they were so simple, they broke easily, and the army often ran out of new ones. A soldier who knew how to sew his own leather was a very lucky man. You take a heavy iron needle from your kit. It is thick and sharp. You reach for a small piece of wood to help you. You cannot just push the needle through the thick leather with your thumb. You would hurt yourself. You use the wood to push the needle through the sole and the upper leather. Push, pull, pull, push, pull. The thread makes a dry, rasping sound as it moves through the holes. You are very careful to make the stitches tight and close together. You want the seal to be as strong as the wood of the hut walls. As you work, the room is quiet. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. You can hear the tick of the fire and the soft snoring of your friend in the corner. The orange light from the hearth makes the leather of the boots look dark and shiny. You focus on the tiny silver needle as it moves in and out. You feel a sense of calm. Fixing something with your hands is good for the mind. It makes you feel like you have control over your world, even if that world is just a small log cabin in the woods. After the sewing is done, you have to protect the leather. You reach into your haversack and find a small tin of daubing. Daubing is a thick, smelly paste made of animal fat and wax. You take a glob of it on your fingers and rub it into the leather of the boot. The warmth of the fire helps the grease soak in. The leather turns from a dusty grey to a deep, rich black. It feels soft and supple again. This grease will keep the water out and stop the leather from cracking in the frost. You set the boot down near the fire to let the grease set. You look at your hands. They are covered in black wax and bits of thread, but you feel proud. Your boots are ready for the snow again. You have used your tools and your time to make sure you can keep walking. The watchman of the kit has done his duty. You pack away your housewife and lean back, feeling the warmth of the fire on your face. You are ready for the next day. The fire is burning low and steady, and the hut is full of a peaceful orange light. You have fixed your boots and dried your coat, But now that your body is resting, your mind starts to wander. You think about the people who are not here. You think about your mother's kitchen, the smell of baking bread, and the sound of your brother's laugh. In the quiet of the winter camp, the distance between you and your home feels very long. To bridge that gap, you reach for your small wooden lap desk. It is time to write a letter. You reach into your knapsack and pull out a small bundle of papers. This is your microhistory detail, a patriotic cover. It is an envelope with a small picture printed in the corner. Some have a picture of a flag, some have a picture of a soldier, and some have a picture of a lady called Liberty. You also pull out a small yellow pencil. Real pens with ink are very hard to use in a hut because the ink can freeze in the bottle, spill on your blankets. A pencil is much better. It is simple, reliable, and the words do not smudge if a snowflake falls on the page. One simple historical fact about the night shift of the soldiers is that they were some of the most literate men in the world at that time. Even though they were far from schools, almost every man knew how to read and write. The army post office was the busiest place in the camp. Thousands of letters moved back and forth every day. It was the only way for a man to stay connected to his old life. Without these letters, the loneliness of the winter would have been too much to bear. You clear a small space on the dirt floor near the hearth. You sit with your back against the solid log wall. The wood is warm from the fire. You lay the paper on your lap desk and hold the pencil in your hand. The wood of the pencil is smooth and warm. You sharpen the tip with your pocket knife, letting the tiny shavings fall into the fire. Scritch, scritch. You think about what you want to say. You don't want to talk about the cold or the hard work. You want to tell them that you are safe. You begin to write. My dear ones, you start. The lead of the pencil moves slowly over the rough paper. You describe the hut. You tell them about the smell of the pine needle bed and the way the mud chinking keeps the wind out. You tell them about the chimney you built with a flour barrel on top. You describe your messmates and the way you all huddle together under the blankets to stay warm. As you write, you feel like they are right there with you, listening to your story. You stop for a moment of atmospheric silence. You look at the paper, then at the fire. The only sound is the soft crackle of the wood and the distant rhythmic clink-clink of a metal tool in another hut. You can see the shadow of your hand moving on the wall. The world feels very small and very quiet. You feel a deep sense of calm. Even though you are hundreds of miles away, the words on the paper are a bridge. You're reaching out across the woods and the mountains to touch the people you love. You finish the letter by asking about the farm. You ask if the old cow is still giving milk, and if the apple trees survived the last storm. You sign your name at the bottom with a flourish. You fold the paper carefully and tuck it into the envelope. You'll take it to the camp post office in the morning. It will travel on a wagon, then a train, and then a horse until it reaches your front door. You put your pencil back in your kit and lean your head against the wall. You feel lighter now. Your heart is no longer heavy with things you wanted to say. You have shared your world with your family, and that makes the hut feel even more like a home. You look at the fire and see a small blue flame dancing on a log. You are the watchman of your own memories. You close your eyes for a second, picturing the face of your mother as she reads your words. You are safe. You are warm. You are remembered. The morning sun is bright and cold, reflecting off the white snow so clearly that it makes your eyes sting. Now that your letter is written and your boots are fixed, you have a different kind of task. Even though the army gives you what you need to survive, there are always little things you miss. Maybe you have too much coffee but not enough sugar. Maybe you have an extra pair of socks that your pipe has run out of tobacco. To get what you need, you have to go to the market. This is not a shop with a roof and a sign. It is a meeting place down by the frozen riverbank. You walk through the camp, your boots making a sharp crunch in the crusty snow. You carry a small cloth sack with a few extra pieces of hardtack and a small bag of coffee beans. You are looking for a trade. As you reach the river, you see dozens of other men standing around. They are all wearing their heavy greatcoats, looking like a forest of blue and grey pillars. The river is wide and slow, with thick plates of white ice floating on the dark water. The air here is damp and smells of wet stone and cold mud. One simple historical fact about these camps is that the soldiers often traded with the men from the other side. Even though they were enemies in the big battles, during the winter they were just men trying to stay warm and fed. Sometimes they would meet in the middle of a frozen river or on a small island to swap goods. It was a silent rule that no one would fight while the trade was happening. It was a moment of peace in the middle of a long war. You find a man sitting on a log. He is wearing a grey coat that is thin and frayed at the edges. He looks cold, but his eyes are kind. This is your micro-history detail, the trading stick. Because it was sometimes dangerous to get too close, men would tie a small bag of goods to the end of a long wooden branch. They would reach out and slide the bag across the ice, or over a small stream to the other person. It was a clever way to swap things without ever touching hands. You stop and stand still for a moment of atmospheric silence. You look across the water at the other camp. You can see the smoke from their fires rising just like yours. You hear the sound of the ice grinding together, a low, groaning noise like a heavy door moving on old hinges. The world feels very big and very quiet. For a second, you forget about the uniforms and the names of the armies. You just see another person who is hungry for a taste of something from home. You hold up your bag of coffee. The man in the grey coat nods and holds up a small, dark twist of tobacco. You both move toward a flat rock at the water's edge. You place your coffee on the stone and step back. He moves forward, takes the coffee, and leaves the tobacco in its place. It is a quiet, honest trade. No words are spoken, but a deal is made. You both nod to each other, a simple sign of respect between two watchmen of the winter. You pick up the tobacco. It is dark and smells of molasses and dried leaves. It is a rich, sweet smell that reminds you of your father's porch in the summer. You tuck it into your pocket, feeling the weight of it against your leg. You have everything you need now. You walk back toward your hut, feeling a sense of satisfaction. You have used your wits to make your life a little bit better. As you walk, the wind picks up, blowing a fine dust of snow across the path. You pull your collar up and think about the man in the grey coat. You hope his coffee tastes good tonight. You hope it warms him up just as much as the tobacco will help you relax by your fire. The winter is hard on everyone, and a small act of sharing makes the cold feel a little less biting. You reach your door and step back into the warmth of your own world, the smell of the sweet tobacco following you inside. The sun has dipped behind the jagged line of the pine trees, and the sky is a deep, bruised purple. You are back inside the hut, the tobacco from your trade sitting safely in your pocket. The fire is a steady, comforting glow in the corner, and the mud walls are warm to the touch. But as the darkness truly settles in, a new sound begins to drift through the logs. It is not the sound of a drum or a bugle. It is the soft, sweet pluck of a string. Someone, a few huts down the line, has brought out a banjo. You sit down on your pine needle bed and lean back. This is a moment of atmospheric silence. You close your eyes and just listen. The music is thin and clear in the cold air. The notes seem to float over the snow like tiny sparks. Then a fiddle joins in, playing a slow, mournful tune. It is a song about a valley far away, a place where the grass is green and the water runs warm. The music fills the gaps between the logs, making the tiny room feel much larger. You can almost see the rolling hills and the white fences of your home in the melody. One simple historical fact about the music in these camps is that it was the most powerful medicine the soldiers had. When a man was tired, hungry, or lonely, a song could make him feel strong again. The generals even worried about certain songs because they made the men too homesick. They sometimes banned tunes like Home Sweet Home because the music was so beautiful it made the soldiers cry. But here, in the quiet of the night shift, the music is just a bridge back to the world you left behind. You reach for your own small instrument. This is your micro-history detail, a jaw harp. It is a tiny piece of metal shaped like a horseshoe with a thin steel tongue in the middle. It fits in your pocket and costs almost nothing. You place the metal frame against your teeth and pluck the steel tongue with your finger. Boing, twang, boing, twang. By changing the shape of your mouth, you can make different notes. It makes a buzzing, hummy sound that blends perfectly with a distant fiddle. The music continues for a long time. Other men in nearby huts start to sing softly. Their voices are low and raspy from the cold, but they are full of heart. You don't know all the words, but you hum along with the rhythm. The sound of the music makes the walls of the hut feel like a shield. It pushes back the darkness of the woods and the fear of the coming spring. For these few minutes, there is no war. There is only the fire, the song, and the warmth of your friends. As the last note of the fiddle fades away, the camp becomes very still. The musicians have tucked their instruments away for the night. You feel a deep sense of peace. The music has smoothed out the rough edges of the day. You pull your blanket up and look at the last few glowing coals in the hearth. The silence that follows the music is not a lonely silence. It is a restful one. You are the watchman of this quiet moment, and you feel ready for sleep. The melody stays in your head, a soft hum that guides you into your dreams. The morning light is very bright today. The sun is bouncing off the fresh white snow outside, and the light comes through the canvas roof like a big soft lamp. You have eaten your breakfast and drunk your coffee. Now it is time for a job that never ends. You need to clean your gear. A soldier has many tools, but the most important one is the long heavy metal tool you carry every day, your rifle. In the winter camp, the damp air and the smoke from the fire are the enemies of metal. They cause a red crust called rust to grow on the steel. If you let the rust take hold, your tool will not work. You must keep it clean and bright. You sit down on your small wooden stool near the fire. You reach for your rifle, which is leaning against the log wall. The metal is very cold to the touch. The barrel is a long tube of dark iron, and the stock is made of smooth brown walnut wood. You lay the rifle across your knees. You can see a few spots of grey dust and a little bit of orange rust near the hammer. You take a deep breath. This is a job that takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. You cannot rush it. One simple historical fact about these rifles is that they were very heavy. A standard rifle weighed about 9 pounds. That is as heavy as a big bag of flour. When you have to carry it for 10 miles on a muddy road, it feels even heavier. But the weight is also a good thing. It means the metal is thick and strong. It means the tool will not break easily when things get hard. You reach into your small kit bag and pull out your cleaning tools. This is your micro-history detail, the wiper. A wiper is a small piece of twisted iron that looks like a little corkscrew. You screw it onto the end of a long wooden stick called a ramrod. You take a small square of white cotton cloth and wrap it around the wiper. Now, you have a tool that can reach deep inside the long metal tube of the barrel. You start by cleaning the outside of the metal. You use a small piece of rough wool and a tiny bit of oil. The oil smells sharp and clean, like the grease used on a wagon wheel. You rub the wool against the barrel, moving your hand back and forth in long, steady strokes. Rub, rub, rub. You watch as the dull grey metal starts to turn shiny and dark. You focus on the small parts, like the trigger and the hammer. You use a tiny twig to get the dirt out of the corners. You want the metal to look like a dark mirror. Now, you must clean the inside. This is the most important part. You take your ramrod with the white cloth on the end. You push it down into the barrel. It makes a soft shh sound as it moves against the iron. When you pull it out, the white cloth is now covered in black soot and grey grease. You throw the dirty cloth into the fire and watch it turn into a tiny orange spark. You take a new piece of white cloth and do it again. You keep doing this until the cloth comes out as clean and white as the snow outside. You stop for a moment of atmospheric silence. You hold the rifle up and look down the barrel toward the night of the fire. The inside of the metal is clean and bright. You can see the tiny lines cut into the iron, which are called rifling. These lines make the bullet spin so it flies straight. The silence in the hut is very deep right now. Your friends are out gathering wood, and you are all alone with your tool. You feel a sense of calm. The metal is cold, the wood is smooth, and the fire is warm. You are taking care of the things that take care of you. You reach for a small tin of beeswax. You use a bit of the wax to rub into the wooden stock. The wood is dry from the heat of the chimney, and it needs the wax to stay strong. You rub the wax in with the palm of your hand. The heat from your skin melts the wax, and the wood soaks it up. The brown walnut turns a deep, rich color, like the bark of a wet oak tree. The wood feels soft and silky under your fingers. It smells sweet, like a beehive in the summer. Cleaning your gear is a way to pass the time, but it is also a way to stay ready. In the winter, it is easy to become lazy. It is easy to just sit by the fire and do nothing. But a soldier who lets his tools get dirty is a soldier who is not prepared. By keeping your rifle bright and your wood polished, you are keeping your mind sharp. You are reminding yourself who you are. You are a watchman, and your gear must be as ready as you are. You put the rifle back together, clicking the metal parts into place. You pull the hammer back to make sure it moves smoothly. Click-clack. The sound is sharp and solid. You wipe away one last fingerprint with your sleeve. The rifle looks beautiful now. The dark metal shines in the firelight, and the wood glows with the beeswax. You lean it back against the wall in its special spot. You look at your hands. They are covered in black oil and grey soot. You rub them together, and the smell of the metal and the wax is very strong. You feel a sense of pride. Your most important tool is clean. It is protected from the rust and the damp. You are ready for the night shift of the century or the long march of the spring. You have done your duty to your gear, and now you can rest. You sit back on your stool and watch the fire, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The watchman of the metal has finished his work. The wind began to howl in the middle of the afternoon. At first, it was just a soft whistle in the chimney, but now it has grown into a deep, angry roar. You are sitting inside your hut, and you can feel the entire forest shaking. A massive winter storm has arrived. This is not the gentle, quiet snow of a few days ago. This is a nor'easter. It is a storm that brings heavy, wet snow and winds so strong they can knock a man off his feet. You are very glad you spent all that time mixing mud for the walls and tightening the buttons on your roof. You stand up and walk to your wooden door. You pull the rope handle tight and make sure the latch is firm. When you look through a tiny crack in the boards, you cannot see the hut across the street. All you see is a wall of swirling white. The snow is moving sideways, driven by the wind. It looks like the world has disappeared into a thick, milky fog. The cold air tries to push its way through the door, but your hardtack box boards hold strong. You step back toward the fire, feeling the contrast between the freezing storm and your warm room. One simple historical fact about these winter storms is that they brought everything in the army to a complete stop. No one could march, no one could drill, and no one could move wagons. The generals would give the order for everyone to stay in quarters. For a few days, the thousands of men in the camp would simply vanish into their holes like rabbits. The busy, noisy city of soldiers would become as quiet as a graveyard, with everyone huddled around their small fires. You look up at your canvas roof. The heavy white cloth is snapping and popping as the wind hits it. It sounds like a drum being played by a giant. You see the ridge pole, that strong oak branch bending slightly under the pressure. You watch the canvas move. It ripples and heaves, but it does not tear. Your ropes are holding. You reach for a long pole and gently poke the underside of the roof. A heavy pile of snow slides off the outside with a muffled whoosh. You have to do this every hour so the weight of the snow doesn't collapse the hut. This is your microhistory detail, the slush lamp. Because the storm has made the hut very dark, you need a little bit of light to see. You don't have a candle, so you make a lamp out of what you have. You take a small tin lid and fill it with leftover pork grease from your breakfast. You take a piece of cotton string from your kit and lay it in the grease, letting one end hang over the edge. You light the string with a spark from the fire. It gives off a small flickering yellow flame and a bit of black smoke, but it is enough to see your way around. You sit down near the hearth and experience a moment of atmospheric silence. The sound of the storm is very loud, but inside the hut, there is a strange kind of peace. You hear the hiss of a snowflake falling down the chimney and hitting the hot coals. You hear the steady thump of the wind against the logs. You feel very small, but you also feel very safe. You realize that without these four walls and this mud, you would not survive out there. This little box of wood is your entire world, and it is doing its job perfectly. The storm makes you feel close to your roommates. The four of you sit together, wrapped in your blankets. You don't talk much because the wind is so loud, but you share a sense of quiet victory. You have outsmarted the winter. You have built a place where the storm cannot reach. You watch the orange light from the slush lamp dance on the mud walls. The grey clay has dried hard, and it looks like stone in the dim light. Not a single draught is coming through the cracks. As the night comes on, the storm gets even stronger. You add a big log to the fire, making sure the chimney is clear. You listen to the forest groaning. Somewhere far away, you hear the crack of a large tree branch breaking under the weight of the ice. It is a reminder of how powerful nature is. But here, tucked away in your bed of pine needles, you are warm. The watchman of the storm is resting. You have done the work, and now you can let the wind roar all at once. You are inside. You are safe. You are home. The wind is still screaming outside the log walls, but the heavy snow has buried the bottom of your hut. This banking of snow actually helps keep the room warmer, as it acts like a thick white blanket against the logs. With the storm keeping everyone inside, there is nothing to do but wait and talk. You and your three roommates are huddled close to the hearth. The orange glow of the fire is the only light in the room now that you have blown out the slush lamp to save the grease. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and the dry, sweet smell of the tobacco you traded for at the river. You lean back against your pack. This is the time for telling tales. When the world outside is white and loud, The world inside becomes a place for memories. You listen as one of your friends tells a story about a summer festival in his village. He describes the taste of fresh peach pie and the way the fiddles sounded under the big oak trees. You can almost see the dusty roads and the bright green grass of July. It feels like a different lifetime, a dream of a world where everything was warm and easy. One simple historical fact about these quiet times is that the soldiers called them pipe clay sessions. While pipe clay was actually white paste used to clean belts, the men used the name for any time spent sitting around and talking about nothing and everything. It was the way they kept their spirits up. By sharing stories of their homes, they reminded each other that there was a world waiting for them once the snow melted and the war was over. You reach into your pocket and pull out a small white object. This is your microhistory detail, a clay pipe. It is a very simple tool made of white, baked earth. It has a long thin stem and a small round bowl. It is very fragile. If you drop it on a stone, it will shatter like glass. You carefully pack a bit of your dark tobacco into the bowl. You lean forward and use a small glowing twig from the fire to light it. A tiny puff of blue smoke rises into the air, joining the grey smoke of the chimney. You take a slow pull on the pipe and experience a moment of atmospheric silence. You don't speak, and neither do your friends. You just watch the fire. The storm makes a deep, thrumming noise against the canvas roof, but here the air is perfectly still. You watch a single spark rise up the chimney and vanish. You feel a deep connection to the men sitting beside you. You have built this house together, you have frozen together on the march, and now you are staying warm together. You aren't just soldiers. You are a family made of choice and hardship. As the night goes on, the stories turn to the past. You tell them about the first time you saw a steam train, and the way the giant black engine hissed and roared like a living beast. You describe the way the iron wheels clicked on the tracks, clack, clack, clack. Your friends listen, their faces soft in the firelight. The fire makes the room feel safe and private, as if the rest of the army has disappeared. There is no rank here, no sergeants or colonels, just 4 men and a fire. The night shift of the storyteller is a gentle one. It doesn't tire your muscles, but it fills your heart. By the time the fire begins to sink into a bed of red coals, you feel a deep, heavy sleepiness. The stories have acted like a lullaby. You knock the ash out of your clay pipe and tuck it safely away in your kit. You crawl back onto the pine needle bed, feeling the spring of the branches. The watchman of the tales has finished his shift. You close your eyes, the sound of the wind now just a distant, peaceful hum. You are home. The great storm has finally passed, leaving the world buried in a thick, silent layer of white. The morning is so bright, it feels like the sun is reflecting off a million tiny diamonds. You step out of your hut, and the air is so cold it feels like a physical blow to your chest. Your first job today is one of the most basic needs of life. You need water. In the winter, you cannot just dip your bucket into the stream and walk away. The world has been locked away behind a door of ice. You have to work for every drop you drink. You pick up your heavy wooden bucket and your felling axe. You walk toward the creek where you gathered clay for the walls. The path is gone, hidden under 3 feet of fresh snow. You have to lift your knees high, like a horse, to move through the powder. Each step is a struggle, and you can feel the cold snow find its way over the tops of your boots. When you reach the creek, it looks like a flat white road. You cannot see the moving water at all. It is covered by a thick plate of blue-grey ice. One simple historical fact about the winter camp is that getting water was a daily battle. An army of thousands of men and thousands of horses needs a huge amount of water every single day. If the creek froze solid, the men would have to melt snow in big pots over the fire, which took a long time and used up a lot of wood. A running creek with a hole chopped in the ice was a very valuable thing. It was the fountain of the camp. You find a spot where you think the water is deepest. You plant your feet wide on the slippery surface. You lift your axe and bring it down hard. Crack. The axe bounces off the ice, leaving only a small white scratch. The ice is much thicker than you thought. You swing again and again. Tock, tock, tock. Finally, the blade bites deep. A spider web of white lines spreads out from the hole. You give it one more heavy blow, and suddenly the ice gives way. A plume of dark, freezing water splashes up, soaking your wool trousers. You stop for a moment of atmospheric silence. You kneel by the hole and look down. The water is a dark tea color, moving quickly beneath the ice. It looks beautiful and dangerous. You can hear the gurgle of the stream as it rushes past the jagged edges of the hole you made. The world is perfectly quiet, except for that one sound of moving water. You feel a deep sense of respect for the creek. Even in the middle of a frozen forest, the water finds a way to keep moving. It is a sign that spring is still alive somewhere deep under the snow. Now you must get the water into your bucket. This is your microhistory detail, the dipper. Because the ice is thick, you cannot just dunk the big bucket into the hole. It wouldn't fit. You use a dipper, made from a large dried gourd or a small tin cup tied to a stick. You dip the cup into the dark water and pour it into your bucket. It is a slow, cold process. Your hands become numb as the freezing water splashes over your fingers. The water is so cold that it starts to turn into slush as soon as it hits the bucket. By the time the bucket is full, your arms are shaking from the cold and the weight. You pick up the bucket and begin the long walk back to the hut. The water sloshes back and forth, and every time a drop hits your leg, it feels like a needle. But you don't stop. You think about the coffee you will make. You think about the hot soup you will cook for your friends. This wash was the life of the hut. You reach your door and kick the snow off your boots. You step inside and set the bucket near the hearth. The water is already starting to form a thin skin of ice on top. You take a ladle and take a long drink. The water is so cold it makes your head ache for a second, but it is the freshest, cleanest thing you have ever tasted. It tastes of the deep earth and the winter sky. The watchman of the water has finished his chore. You have brought the river into your home, and you are ready for the day. The sun is beginning to drop low again, and the air inside the hut is starting to lose its golden glow. The water you brought from the creek is sitting in the bucket, and your belly is full of the simple meal you shared with your friends. But as the shadows grow long, you know that the most important work is still ahead. In the winter camp, the night is the time when the cold tries hardest to break into your house. To keep the winter at bay, you must feed the heart of the hut. You must keep the fire burning bright. You stand up and walk to the corner where you keep your wood. The pile is getting small. During the great storm, you used many logs to stay warm, and now you must restock. You pick up your axe and step outside. The snow is deep and crisp, and the sky is a pale icy blue. You walk to the large oak log you dragged in before the storm. It is a backlog, a thick, heavy piece of wood that is too big to burn all at once. It is meant to sit at the very back of the fireplace and hold the heat for hours and hours. One simple historical fact about these fires is that the men became experts at woodcraft. They knew that different trees did different things. They used pine to get a fire started quickly because the sap burns fast and hot. But they used oak or hickory for the long nights. A good oak backlog could stay glowing until the sun came up, making sure the men never woke up to a freezing room. It was the battery that kept the house running while everyone slept. You use your axe to trim the log so it fits perfectly into your stone firebox. Thwack, thwack. The wood is hard and frozen, and the axe makes a sharp, ringing sound. You can see the rings in the wood, showing how old the tree was. You feel a sense of respect for the oak. It took 50 years to grow, and now it will give its life to keep you warm for one more night. You lift the heavy log, feeling the strain in your arms and back. You carry it inside and set it carefully against the back wall of the hearth. This is your microhistory detail, the char stick. When you look at the fire from yesterday, you see pieces of wood that are black and crumbly but did not turn into white ash. This is charcoal. Soldiers would save these char sticks to start the next fire. Because the wood has already been cooked by the heat, it catches a spark much faster than fresh wood. You gather a handful of these black sticks and pile them in front of your new backlog. You take a moment of atmospheric silence. You kneel on the dirt floor and watch the first tiny flames start to climb the oak bark. The hut is very quiet. The wind has died down outside, and the only sound is the crackle and pop of the wood. You can feel the heat starting to push out from the stones. It hits your face and your hands, and you feel your muscles start to let go of the day's tension. You are the watchman of the flame, and you are doing your job well. You add a few more medium-sized branches on top of the char sticks. You want the fire to be strong, but not too big. If the fire is too large, it will waste the wood and make the hut too hot to sleep. You want a steady golden glow. You watch as the smoke finds the mouth of the chimney and disappears. You see the light reflecting off the mud-chinked walls, making the whole room look warm and safe. The night shift of the fire builder is a peaceful one. You sit back on your heels and look at the hearth. The stones are starting to glow with a deep hidden heat. Even when the flames go down later tonight, those stones will stay warm, acting like a heater for your feet. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction. You have the water, you have the wood, and you have the fire. The winter can do its worst, but inside this little box of logs, you are the master of your world. You lean against the wall, watching the dancing shadows, and wait for the night to truly begin. The fire is a deep, pulsing orange, and the oak backlog is finally glowing like a piece of the sun itself. The room is filled with a heavy, golden warmth that seems to push the walls outward, making the tiny hut feel like a grand hall. You have done all your chores. The water is in the bucket, the gear is clean, and the door is latched tight. Now, the weight of the day and the weight of the long winter is starting to pull at your shoulders. Your limbs feel like they are made of lead, and your eyelids are getting very heavy. It is time to rest your tired, heavy eyes. You stand up one last time to check the roux. You move slowly, feeling the stiffness in your joints. You look at your 3 messmates. They are already sitting on the edge of the pine needle bed, pulling off their wool jackets and unrolling the blankets. No one is talking. The air in the hut is so thick with comfort that words are not needed. You reach for the soldier's feathers and give the branches a little pat. They still have that wonderful springy bounce. You can smell the fresh scent of the pine needles as the heat from the fire wakes up the oils in the green wood. One simple historical fact about sleep in these camps is that the men slept spoon style. Because the bed was small and the blankets were few, all 4 men would lie on their sides, facing the same direction. When one man wanted to turn over in the middle of the night, he would shout "spoon," and everyone would flip over to the other side at the exact same time. It was the only way to stay covered and keep the warmth of your bodies trapped under the wool. It was a strange way to live, but it kept many men from freezing in the deep dark of the night. You take off your heavy leather boots and set them side by side near the hearth. Your feet feel light and cold for a second before the heat of the fire finds them. You climb onto the bed, feeling the soft crunch of the needles beneath you. You slide in next to your friend, and the 2 of you pull the first heavy blanket over your legs. Then the other 2 men join you. You are like a row of brothers, tucked away from the rest of the world. The gum blanket is on the bottom, keeping the dampness of the earth away, and 3 layers of wool are on top. This is your micro-history detail, the haversack pillow. You do not have a soft pillow made of down or cotton. Instead, you take your empty haversack, the small canvas bag you use to carry your food, and you stuff it with your spare shirt and a pair of clean wool socks. You fold it over and tuck it under your head. It is a bit lumpy and smells faintly of salt pork, but it is much better than the hard dirt. It holds your head at just the right angle as you look toward the fire. You experience a moment of atmospheric silence. You lie there, perfectly still, watching the shadows dance on the canvas roof. The fire is no longer licking the wood with bright yellow tongues. It has settled into a steady, quiet hum. You can hear the tick of a cooling stone in the chimney and the soft, rhythmic breathing of your friends. Outside, the wind is moving through the trees with a sound like a distant river, but it feels like it is 1,000 miles away. You are safe in your wooden cocoon. You are the watchman of this peace, and you are finally letting your guard down. The warmth of the hut is like a heavy, soft hand pressing you down into the bed. You feel your muscles finally let go of the tension from chopping wood and carrying water. You think about the night shift of the sentries out in the snow, and you send a silent thank you to the man walking the beat. Because he is awake, you can finally close your eyes. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for this little house. It is more than just logs and mud. It is a promise of tomorrow. The orange light of the fire starts to fade as you drift closer to sleep. The world becomes a blur of soft shapes and sweet smells. You feel the warmth of the man next to you and the weight of the blankets holding you steady. You are not a soldier right now. You are just a human being who is warm, safe, and tired. Your heavy eyes finally close, and you let the darkness take you. You are at rest in the heart of the winter camp. The long dark of the winter has felt like a lifetime, but this morning, something is different. You wake up on your bed of soldier's feathers, and the air in the hut does not have that sharp, icy bite. You sit up and look at the roof. The white canvas is not glowing with that pale, cold light of the snow. Instead, there is a bright, warm yellow light hitting the cloth. You hear a sound you haven't heard in months. It is the sound of water dripping. Drip, drop. The heavy ice on the edge of the roof is melting. You stand up and walk to the door, pulling it open to find a world that is finally changing. The snow is no longer a crisp white blanket. It is turning soft and grey, sinking back into the earth. You can see the dark brown tops of the tall grass peeking through the slush. The air smells different today. It does not smell like metal or frost. It smells like wet dirt and waking trees. This is the night shift of the seasons. While you were sleeping, the earth was turning toward the sun. You look at the trees and see the tiny, hard bumps of buds on the branches of the oaks. The spring sun is coming, and the winter camp is about to become a memory. One simple historical fact about the end of winter camp is that it was a time of great busyness. As soon as the roads dried out, the army would leave these huts behind forever. Thousands of men would pack their knapsacks, pull down their canvas roofs, and march away. These log cities that took so much work to build would be left to the forest. In a few years, the logs would rot away, and the mud would return to the creek, leaving only a few square lines in the dirt to show where you once lived. You look at your hut one last time. You see the mud chinking you smoothed with your own hands. You see the hardtack box door and the stick chimney that kept you safe during the great storm. You feel a little bit sad to leave it, but you are mostly happy. The cold is over. You take your housewife and your tin cup and tuck them into your pack. You help your friends take down the ridgepole and fold at the canvas. Your house is a box without a lid once again, but you don't mind. You are ready to move. This is your micro-history detail, the spring dandelion. As you walk toward the wagon lines, you see a single, tiny yellow flower growing in a patch of mud near a stump. It is the first bit of colour you have seen in a long time. You stop and look at it for a moment of atmospheric silence. The camp is loud with the sound of shouting men and rolling wheels, but for you, the world is just that one small flower. It is a sign that life is stronger than the winter. You feel a sense of hope rising in your chest. The watchman of the winter has finished his guard. You have survived the snow, the wind, and the long, dark nights. You have stayed warm in your little wooden world, and now the sun is calling you back to the road. You shoulder your pack, feeling the familiar weight. You look at the empty log walls of your home and give them a silent nod of thanks. You turn your back on the winter camp and step out into the mud of the new year. The sun is warm on your face and the path is clear. The world is slowing down now. The story of the logs and the mud is fading into the quiet of the night. You are safe in your own bed, far away from the cold woods and the heavy snow. The sounds of the axes and the crackling fires are just soft echoes in your mind. Feel the weight of your own blankets, thick and warm, holding you steady. Your work for today is finished. Your chores are done. You have no more logs to lift and no more water to carry. You are like the soldier at the end of the long winter. You can let the tension go. Your breathing is slow and deep, like the wind moving through the high pines. The warmth of your room is steady, and the darkness is a kind friend. There is nothing left to do but drift away. The seasons are turning, and you are turning with them into a deep, peaceful sleep. You are protected, you are comfortable, and you are at rest. The sun is rising. The gates are opening. The watch is ended.